Then it's settled. My legion will go under my command, and your special gene seed offspring, Magnus's prodigy, will come with us, Lionel Johnson announced. Magnus's gene seed offspring was not an ordinary scion, a full cultivator of unprecedented power. He wielded destructive chi energy and terrifying psychic might inherited from Magnus himself. With this cultivator joining them, plus Axis's 2 and the Wolf Guard's 2, Lion now had 4 of the most potent warriors at his back. He was confident he could hold the Zidon, perhaps even crush them. No problem, Lion King. Take everything from my legion except me. I'll also prepare some mortal auxiliary forces, Magnus said. He would give Lion his fullest support. Magnus's offspring could also act as a navigator through the warp, aiding the journey to Holy Terra. Axis inclined his head. In the Dark Age to come, figures like Mephiston of the Blood Angels had guided fleets through the warp. Magnus's cultivator offspring could do the same if his psychic power proved strong enough. Then let's not waste time. Axis, Magnus, both of you board my ship at once. We'll return to Holy Terra immediately, Captain General Valdor of the Adeptus Custodes ordered. With Magnus's navigator, a warp return to Terra would be the safest and quickest course. No. Who said we're going via the warp? Axis replied, a teasing smile crossing his face. Why risk months in the warp when the webway existed? By the time a warp crossing was done, the slaughter at Avanti 5 might already be finished. Mr. Axis, if you're not taking our ship, how do you intend to reach Holy Terra? This vessel is the Emperor's flag, able to navigate even the fiercest warp storms. With Magnus aboard, it's the fastest way back, Valdor said, voice tight with concern. Axis met Valdor's stare. I have contacts with the Harlequins. The reason I managed to ferry the Loyalist survivors from Ivante 3 to Prospero was because the Eldar helped me. You mean Xenos? Axis, what do you mean by that? Valdor's displeasure showed in every word. Under the Imperial truth, Xenos were the enemy, and humanity the highest order. Don't be absolutist. During the Great Crusade, many non-human races were assimilated as abhumans within the Imperium. Rogue traders have always been allowed to make diplomatic contact. Gene seed Primarchs can sign rogue trader warrants. Having allies among Xenos is not unheard of, and they helped us here, Axis said calmly. Magnus nodded in agreement. Axis is correct. I have the authority to endorse such arrangements. A connection with the Eldar has proven useful in this war. Lionel Johnson glanced between them and fell silent. Valdor, after a long beat, said, Fine. When do we depart? Axis had already summoned Cassandra, who had returned to his side. Cassandra had been stationed aboard the Morning Star, now temporarily commanded by Axis's son, an arrangement made while Axis was absent. His son had no authority to use the webway, so on learning Axis had vanished, the Morning Star's captain had recalled Cassandra to await his return. Now she stood before him again. Lord Axis, Cassandra greeted. To the Eldar, Axis's absence was but a short interval. She showed no surprise. I need to contact the Laughing God, Axis said. Cassandra bowed, sat cross-legged, and drew the Laughing God's Harlequin cards from her bosom. She channeled her psychic will. In a shimmer of colored light, the Laughing God, Segorok, appeared. We meet again, Mr. Axis. Your kind is in grave trouble, the Laughing God said. The great heresy would shatter the Imperium as it stood. The weakened Eldar still depended on humanity to check chaos. Recovery for his people would take millennia. There is grave trouble. I need your consent to bring a human battleship through the webway to Holy Terra, Axis said. Ah, a favor, the Laughing God purred, eyes laughing. We are friends, are we not? After this heresy, you will owe me. A few more recruits for my troop would be delightful. Axis smiled. The Harlequins could always use more devotees. It was a small price. Use the webway whenever you wish, the Laughing God said. The exit for Holy Terra opens at Pluto. You will need to travel along the webway to reach it. Axis nodded. The Laughing God liked to tease. He could open a route from near the moon if he wished, but Axis also knew the Emperor's constancy. Revelations like that would not be taken lightly by Terra. Better to keep such advantages quiet. The matter of Horus was already troubling the Emperor enough. One more thing, Segorok said, and his face darkened. Beware the traitors among you. There are more than those already revealed. I can only give hints. At least half of the Gene Seed Primarchs will take part in this rebellion. 4 have been exposed. Another has already fallen to Khorne and will soon join. Be wary. Axis listened. He already suspected that many Primarchs had betrayed the cause. The only unknown was the second Primarch, Karl, the one who owed his life to Axis. Which way would Karl fall? I will gather my troop and prepare the webway, Cassandra said, bowing. You may use it when you are ready. Good. We can depart at any time, Axis told the commanders assembled on Prospero. We must wait at least 2 days, Magnus interjected. I need time to arrange my legion. As their gene father, Magnus had to prepare the 1,000 Sons for detachment. Over the next 48 hours, the Adeptus Custodes and the Sisters of Silence rested on Prospero. Lionel Johnson's First Legion resupplied on site. The 1,000 Sons assembled within the time Magnus requested. When the men were mustered, Magnus announced that his most powerful gene seed scion, Crus, the cultivator Axis had trained for him, would take temporary command of the Legion. Crus would cooperate with Lionel Johnson to meet the traitorous invaders. My children, Magnus addressed his legion, I cannot stand with you. The Lord of Mankind needs me elsewhere, but you will serve under Lionel Johnson. Obey his commands for the sake of the 1,000 Sons. Yes, great Gene Father, for the 1,000 Sons, we will strike at the enemies of the Imperium. Crus shouted, raising his psychic staff. Time and duty had made him the Legion's foremost leader. Depart, my children, Magnus said, waving them forward. The 1,000 Sons rendezvoused with Lionel Johnson's fleet. From the command platform, Lion addressed them with steel in his voice. Axis, Magnus, I leave the Emperor's flank in your hands. I will not let the Zedon set foot on Imperial worlds. I believe in you, Lion of the Imperium, Axis called back. Lionel Johnson saluted them once, then turned and led his fleet out into the black, resolute as ever. 222, Hyperdrive, arriving at Holy Terra. After bidding farewell to Lionel Johnson, Axis and Magnus boarded a landing craft with Captain General Valdor and set course for the Emperor's flagship. The Emperor's Dream had been docked at Terra's starport for 10 years since the Emperor's return. It had been dispatched now to collect Axis and Magnus. Boarding the Emperor's Dream again filled Axis with emotion. It was on this very ship that he had first traveled to Terra to undergo the Emperor's modifications. It's ready. Axis, all the ship's systems are prepared. We can move now, Valdor announced. He was visibly curious about navigation through the webway. The Emperor had often told him the webway would be the future of humanity. It's simple. See the Harlequin's ship? We just follow it. We don't need to worry about anything else, Axis said, pointing at the Eldar craft that had appeared before the Emperor's Dream. Valdor nodded and ordered the engine crews to fire. The Emperor's Dream followed the Eldar vessel toward the webway gate in the Prospero system. Bathed in a silver-white light, the massive flagship slid into the webway, a bizarre, kaleidoscopic corridor of a hyperspace channel older than memory, built by the old ones. This is incredible. This method of travel is truly advanced, Axis. How long until we reach Holy Terra? Valdor asked. I'm not sure. Cassandra, what's our estimated time to Terra? Axis replied. He had been through the webway only twice and did not know the transit time from Prospero. Lord Axis, estimated transit time is 15 days. Exit is set near Pluto, Cassandra reported. 15 days? That's astonishing. It took us at least 3 months to reach Prospero by warp, Valdor said, amazed at the speed, roughly 6 times faster. Cassandra seemed to smile. The webway was ancient and decayed. Its current speed was much diminished from its prime. When it had first been completed, travel had been far faster. Tech priests and other technicians crowded at observation ports, hungrily recording data from the strange world outside the hull, though many of them lacked the framework to truly understand how the webway worked. Even the Emperor himself had never fully unraveled its secrets. Valdor, how is the hyperspace engine development going? I've been away for 98 years. There hasn't been any real progress, has there? Axis asked. Soon after his first transmigration, he had given the hyperspace engine to the Emperor. He had been curious what had become of it through decades of work, and now with the great heresy erupting, its status mattered all the more. Axis, that project is classified at the highest level of the Imperium, Valdor said. What highest level? I gave the design for the hyperspace engine to the Emperor himself. He didn't hide it from me, Axis replied. Valdor's jaw tightened. He hadn't meant to offend, but there were reasons for secrecy. An Eldar presence, Cassandra, remained on board. The hyperspace engine was humanity's trump card. They could not let Xenos learn too much. Lord Axis, I will take my leave now, Cassandra said, bowing with the politeness of her kind. She had been away from the Morning Star for over 90 years and knew the ship's projects only in part. Arrange a VIP suite for this lady, Valdor instructed. 2 custodes escorted Cassandra away. Axis, you must understand the need for secrecy. The hyperspace engine is vital. You can't just reveal its details, Valdor scolded after Cassandra left. It's not a big secret, not yet. The Eldar are still allies, and Cassandra is discreet. Anyway, how is the engine coming along? If the Imperium had a working hyperspace engine, warp storms wouldn't cripple travel, Axis said. He also knew that the Laughing God, whatever that presence was, could detect certain things, and he had uploaded capabilities that could combine with the engine to bypass warp travel in many cases. The progress is slow, but there are achievements. The Imperium has produced an engine capable of stable 10 times light speed travel. Small Imperial craft can already use it within ranges of 20 to 30 light years. Larger ships cannot yet be fitted, Valdor answered. Axis frowned. The engine Axis had provided had been tiny, built for a single-person craft. To scale it up required replication and re-engineering, and current Imperial shipbuilding materials and standards were inadequate. Adopting the technology across the Imperium would demand an industrial leap back to something like the Golden Age. How small is small? Axis asked. Think torpedo transports and ships a few hundred meters long. Anything over 1,000 meters, even a sword-class frigate, can't take it, Valdor said. Then what's the point? Axis snapped. This is already a remarkable achievement. Yours was essentially an escape pod unit. The fact that we can apply it to ships several hundred meters long is exceptional. The 20 times light speed variant has been experimentally successful. In time, it could fit a sword-class frigate. That's a major step, Valdor insisted, though his tone betrayed his own frustration at Imperial limitations. Axis just wanted to rest. Forget it. I need sleep. This will be far more comfortable than warp travel, he said, thinking the Morning Star might be the faster path forward if the Imperium labored at their glacial pace. Axis went to find Cassandra on a personal matter. Cassandra, can you contact the Morning Star? Members of the clown troupe are still searching. We should have news soon. Once they learn your situation, the Morning Star will make haste, she replied. Axis nodded and returned to his quarters. The transit through the webway itself was dull. 15 days later, the Emperor's Dream followed the Harlequin to the designated exit, and in a flash of white light, the gate closed behind them. The great ship found itself in orbit around Pluto. Imperial automated defenses scanned and trained vast batteries on the intruder, but after identification confirmed the vessel's identity as the Emperor's Dream, all alarms were dropped. The Harlequin ship signaled Axis and departed. Its duty done, it left the human ship at the webway exit. Procedural checks, political formalities, and orbital clearances followed. By the time the Emperor's Dream cleared bureaucracy and made the transit inward to Terra, the total time since their departure had stretched to 4 months. Once the ship reached Terra orbit and identification was complete, Captain General Valdor, Axis, and Magnus descended to the Imperial Palace in a landing craft. En route, Axis noticed that the palace's guards had all been replaced by Imperial Fist's Space Marines. Not a single custodian was to be seen. After passing through myriad checkpoints, they were escorted to the Golden Throne. The Emperor sat upon it, his face drawn and pained, features twisted with strain. He looked worse than Axis had ever seen him. "Father-in-law, I'm back," Axis blurted. "Father, I'm here," Magnus added. "You finally returned, Axis and Magnus," the Emperor said. They had come sooner than expected. By normal reckoning, their journey should have taken more than 6 months. "Father, we have terrible news. Horus has launched the Great Heresy. He has betrayed you," Magnus said. The Emperor's face went blank, disbelief cutting through. "What?" The Lord of Mankind's golden eyes narrowed until they were mere slits. His face went utterly grim, and for a moment the air in the throne hall felt as if it had frozen. Disbelief warred with dawning horror across his features. "Could there be a mistake?" Macario asked, rising to speak. He knew the bond between the Lord of Mankind and Horus better than most. Horus had been the Emperor's favorite among the Primarchs. The arrival of Axis and Kasha's grandson had distracted the Emperor for a time, but Horus remained the son he had trusted most. "Macario, sovereign, you heard correctly," Axis said. "Horus has launched the great heresy. We have evidence. On Istvan III there was a purge. Loyal Marines under his command were executed. A number of survivors escaped and smuggled out recorded footage of what happened. The loyal Space Marines had paid dearly to get such proof out. Their Gene Father had turned against the Emperor, yet they had put on the guise of betrayal, recorded the events, found a way to warn their fellows, and escaped. Summon them at once. I want to see them myself," the Lord of Mankind said. Axis inclined his head and gave a brief gesture. Over 100 battle brothers, Marines severed from the Death Guard, the Emperor's children, and the sons of Horus, marched in. Their power armor bore scorch marks in the grime of retreat. Their helmets were tucked under their arms. Their captain, Garrow, stepped forward and knelt before the golden throne. "Great Lord of Mankind," he said, "we are honored to stand before you. We beg your pardon. We bring you shameful news. Our Gene Father has betrayed you." "Show me the recordings," the Lord of Mankind ordered. Captain Garrow produced a stored hololithic file. The custodes received it with solemn efficiency and carried it to the golden throne. The Lord of Mankind accepted the projection personally. His hands trembled slightly, whether from the strain of his station or the weight of what he was about to see, no one could tell. In the footage, Horus stood before the legions and spoke with a voice that seethed like a blade. He proclaimed his authority, denounced the Emperor, and called himself a tyrant no more. He had then marshaled the legion's librarium and mustered a host of Chaos warlocks, directing them against the webway. The attack, slickly coordinated, smashed through the safeguards and corrupted the pathways the Emperor had so painstakingly constructed. The Lord of Mankind's face crumpled. For a long while, he had believed the webway's disruption to be the work of the ruinous powers. Now, he saw Horus's hand in it. Beside Horus, the recordings showed Fulgrim, Mortarion, and the Gith Primarch among the conspirators. The betrayals of Mortarion and the Zecth Primarch did not entirely surprise him. Both had long harbored grievances against certain policies of the Imperium. He had even, privately, considered more severe measures regarding the Zecth Primarch. But the treachery of Horus and Fulgrim cut far deeper. He had trusted Horus above almost all others. Horus had been the first son to return to him, and they had spent 30 years together. The Emperor had poured his paternal care into that son. Fulgrim had struck him as brilliant and noble at their first meeting. The Emperor had bestowed upon the Third Legion the title of the Emperor's children and allowed them the double-headed Imperial Eagle. For the Lord of Mankind, to see both men turn was a blow that staggered his very purpose. "Pull yourself together, my lord," Macario murmured. He had seen the Emperor hurt before, but he had never seen the wound cut so deep. The Lord of Mankind drew a long breath and steadied himself. "You have done well to bring this to me," he said to the kneeling loyalists. "It is a rare and perilous loyalty to remain true when your Gene Father has betrayed the Imperium. You will continue to serve. I place my trust in you." Captain Garrow bowed his head. "I am ashamed, my lord. I am dishonored by the actions of my brothers and my Gene Father." "You are not to blame," the Emperor replied. "You have been through much. Rest now. I will have Rogal Dorn take a full account. Cooperate with him. Tell him everything." The custodes led the loyal survivors away to recover. The Lord of Mankind turned his attention to the two Primarchs, who still stood in the great chamber. "Axis Magnus," he said softly, "this is the most perilous hour of humanity, yet your return steadies me." "Father," Magnus replied, "we are with you. Tell me exactly how things unfolded after Axis was recovered. I do not see Leman Russ. Where is he?" Axis explained the campaign that had followed his disappearance. He and Magnus had elected to split their forces to meet a separate threat. Lionel Johnson had taken his first legion and the Thousand Sons to reinforce Leman Russ against the alien power called the Raiden. The Lord of Mankind's jaw tightened. "Those foes have grown more dangerous than I imagined," he said. "I had intended to tear up that truce when you returned, Axis, and crush the Raiden once and for all. With your arrival now, we might have been able to do so. Yet this heresy changes everything." "We must not fear, Father," Axis said. Lionel Johnson has already gone to support the front. You do not understand, the Lord of Mankind answered. You have been away from the Imperium 98 years. The Raiden are not what they once were. They have developed a weapon of star god power. It is unlike anything I expected. L. Johnson must have reinforcements, or even 3 legions will be hard-pressed to stop them. And Axis, how did you manage to return to Terra so quickly? By my reckoning, you should have arrived at least 2.5 months later at the earliest. You will recall we used the webway, Axis said. The Emperor's face registered surprise, but not astonishment. Valdor and the Custodes would have relayed some fragments, but Axis chose to speak plainly. You could use the Eldar webway? The Lord of Mankind asked. I aided an Eldar troop in a small matter while I was lost, Axis explained. They permitted me to use the webway as a favor. That, and the aid of Magnus and the loyal Marines, is why we were able to return to Terra so swiftly. The Emperor closed his eyes for a moment. The Eldar had always been inscrutable to him, glittering, dismissive, and arrogant. He remembered the laughing god, that trickster among their gods, who had shown him an odd measure of favor in ages past. The aid of the craft-world Eldar and their kin, excluding the Dark Scions, was a complicated debt the Imperium would not forget. Father, Magnus said, our first priority must be to end this rebellion before it consumes the fledgling Imperium. Before the Lord of Mankind could answer, heavy steps echoed through the palace. Rogol Dorn strode in, armored in gilt, and immediately fell to one knee before the golden throne. Father, he said, voice low, I have news. Tell me, the Emperor said without preamble. There is little worse I can bear now. Ferrus Manus has reached me by astropathic signal, Rogol Dorn said. Fulgrim and Horus approached him, attempting to draw him into their rebellion. He refused and was forced to withdraw after a brief engagement. He has been trying to transmit a report to Terra. Only today did his message arrive. I already know of Horus's treachery, the Emperor replied. Axis and Magnus brought further confirmation, including footage. The Raiden have likewise resumed hostilities. Leman Russ and Lionel Johnson are restraining them. How shall we divide our forces between these two wars? The Emperor judged Rogol Dorn's mind for counsel. Rogol had always been among the most strategic of his sons. He had been appointed War Master of the right flank for a reason. Father, Dorn said after a measured pause, we must mobilize swiftly. Assemble a great host to crush the rebellion and send at least 1 legion to reinforce the Western Front against the Raiden. Priority 1 is to extinguish Horus's heresy, then turn to the alien threat. Magnus and I will remain on Holy Terra to repair the webway, the Lord of Mankind said. We cannot leave. Terra must not suffer another psychic shock. This war will fall to you, Dorn. Present your strategy. Rogol Dorn outlined his plan. Communications with the wider Imperium were only partially restored. The legions currently reachable were the Iron Hands, Salamanders, Raven Guard, Night Lords, Word Bearers, the Second Legion, Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, and the White Scars. The Ultramarines, Axis's Golden Legion, and Sanguinius's Blood Angels were not yet in contact. First, Dorn said, we inform those we can reach of Horus's betrayal. Recall the White Scars to Terra for defense. Then marshal the Iron Hands, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, Night Lords, Raven Guard, Salamanders, the Second Legion, and the Alpha Legion, that is 8 legions. Send them to the Istvan system to stamp out the heresy. Axis should reinforce the Western Front. Only his strength can hope to counter the Raiden's Star God weapon. It was a stark plan. Concentrate where you could and use Axis as the blade in the West. For the moment, it seemed the best option. I object, Axis said quietly but firmly. Horus's uprising is bound to chaos. I must be there in this battle. This wasn't Rogol Dorn's idea of an 8-on-4. It was Horus's. If the second Primarch turned traitor as well, what Dorn saw as 8 versus 4 could become 9 against 3. The numbers would mean nothing against Axis. The traitor legions, however numerous on paper, were irrelevant when Axis stood in the field. He didn't even need to reach his Super Saiyan 4 form. Even a basic Super Saiyan surge was more than enough for him to tear an army apart. This plan is perfect, Axis, Rogol Dorn insisted. I know you are furious over Horus's slander, but you must think of the larger picture. The greatest threat now is the Raiden. If you don't go west, Lionel Johnson and Leman Russ will probably be killed. You can't imagine how powerful that Star God fragment weapon is. Axis, Dorn is right. You should go to the western front where Horus is. The rest can be handled by the other Gene Seed Primarchs, Magnus added. Lion and Russ can hold for a time. There is wisdom in securing our rear before facing our enemies. Axis's mouth twitched. He looked to the Emperor and gave him a pointed glance. Some things did not belong in the open. The Emperor and he both knew that half of the Gene Seed Primarchs would betray. Rogel Dorn did not. Dorn's confidence, born of ignorance, made him blind to the trap. If the truth were spoken aloud, the clever minds among the Primarchs would quickly deduce too much. Dorn, go meet the loyal Space Marines Axis brought back, the Emperor said with a single wave. They will have first-hand reports on the rebels. Speak with them. It will help you shape your plans. He kept the treachery of half the Primarchs to himself. The news would shatter morale and unravel command. For now, secrecy was the better weapon. Dorn bowed, acknowledged, and left. As the Emperor's most faithful son, he knew what to ask and what to leave alone. Magnus, go and rest, the Emperor continued. Tomorrow you will sit upon the golden throne with me to begin repairing the webway. It is a vast undertaking. You must be at your best. I understand, father-in-law, Magnus said. Axis, I'll leave everything to you. He turned and departed. At last, only the Emperor, Micardo, and Axis remained in the throne chamber. The hush of the hall settled over them. You worry I fear the Primarchs we send to suppress the rebellion might turn, the Emperor said. Are you certain? Not certain, absolute, Axis replied. Magnus and I are loyal. Dorn is loyal. Lionel Johnson and Leman Russ are faithful. But Guilliman, Sanguinius, and my son, they are the question marks. The Emperor nodded slowly. Guilliman is uncertain. Sanguinius keeps secrets, but I believe he is still my son in loyalty. Your son, my grandson, I trust him absolutely. Axis frowned. Father-in-law, consider this. When Holy Terra and the Imperium lost contact, then suddenly regained partial communications the moment we returned, only certain Primarchs were reachable. The Golden Legion, the Ultramarines, the Blood Angels, the most powerful forces, were left out. Horus set a trap on Istvan V. He will use it to annihilate many loyal legions and cripple the Imperium. You mean there are traitors among Dorn's 8? The Emperor asked. Yes, and if I'm correct, Angron will join once Horus and Chaos have consolidated, Axis said. The Emperor's face darkened. Angron will join if the bridge to Chaos is secured. That much I would have expected. Micardo, Axis asked. What did the Assassin Temple's surveillance show regarding the more dangerous Primarchs? Micardo, ever precise, stepped forward with the reports. Perturabo of the Iron Warriors and Conrad of the Night Lords are dangerous. Perturabo's legion has been hardened by constant war. Their mental state is frayed. Conrad's world breeds cruelty. The planetary governor sent criminals into his ranks, and the recruits are poor. Both are far more likely than some to be won over to Horus. Axis nodded. And Lorgar? You would include Lorgar? The Emperor said sharply. I burned the perfect city to warn him. There were no deaths. I hope to curb his zealotry. He has continued the crusade since. Do not be so sure, Axis said. Once a fanatic's faith collapses, anything can happen. He once worshipped you as a god. You refused the role. He will seek a new god. Lorgar is the most dangerous of all, more likely to turn than Perturabo or Conrad. Micardo agreed. Axis is right. Lorgar's devotion makes him unpredictable. If his faith turns, he will not do so quietly. The Emperor was silent for a moment, weighing their words. Then, deciding, he turned to Axis. Very well. Dorn will think this a straightforward operation, and he will not pry beyond what I give him. I will place you in overall command of the pacification. You will lead the 8 Primarchs Dorn has gathered, the Emperor continued. If anyone rises in rebellion, I authorize you to execute them on the spot. Axis bowed his head. Understood. I will also try to contact Guilliman and Sanguinius. The Ultramarines and Blood Angels can be summoned to aid the Western Front. I have entrusted an Eldar Harlequin to locate them, and my Golden Legion can be dispatched to bolster the Imperium's defenses there. No, the Emperor said quietly, and the word halted Axis. Bring your Golden Legion home. The burden of these wars will fall heavily on you. A greater war awaits your gene seed offspring. Greater? Axis repeated. The webway, the Emperor said. The rupture there has connected to the warp. The 4 Chaos gods are clawing at it. trying to widen the tier and spill forth demons. We must seal and repair it. The work will require both of us upon the Golden Throne. That is why your legion must be recalled to Terra." Axis understood the gravity in the Emperor's voice. Between Horus's treachery at Istvan and the void at the heart of the webway, the Imperium faced peril on two fronts. The choice was raw: send power to crush a usurper, or defend the very fabric of reality from tearing open. The Emperor had chosen the webway. Outside the Golden Throne's chamber, Dorn readied for war, unaware of half the truth. Inside, Axis steeled himself for the orders to come, to hunt traitors with both a commander's ruthlessness and the certainty that some he called brother would become his enemy. 2 and 25. Fighting the internet war, one man can defeat 10,000 men. Endless daemon armies are assaulting the webway. Even though I've erected a psychic barrier, it only delays the Chaos God's power from utterly destroying it. There is still an unending tide of daemons pouring toward Holy Terra. You must have seen it. In my palace, there isn't a single custodian left on guard. Almost all of the custodians and Sisters of Silence have been deployed to the webway front. They've been fighting without respite for months. Many custodians have already died of exhaustion. I have no choice but to deploy regular Imperial troops and even some Space Marines from Rogel Dorn's Imperial fists to try to fill the gap, the Emperor said. The savagery of the webway war exceeded even his grim expectations. He had spent centuries using Golden Age gene tech to create the Custodian Guard, and in a little over 4 months, 1,000 of them had been lost. If this continued, the Custodians might be cut down to a few regiments, or fewer still. He urgently needed fresh forces to bolster the defense of Holy Terra. According to Rogel Dorn's plan, the White Scars would have been ideal if they could be recalled. Failing that, if Axis could call back his Golden Legion, they would be perfect. Axis's gene seed offspring possessed phenomenal combat abilities. Their golden transformations exceeded those of ordinary Space Marines. Even a short intervention could give the Custodians a breathing spell and prevent many more deaths from exhaustion. All right, father-in-law, I understand. If I contact my legion, I'll have them return to Holy Terra to join the Webway War. But if things are urgent right now, you can withdraw the Custodians. I can hold the daemons for a while, Axis said. Holy Terra faced not only external threats, but a colossal, brutal war originating within the Webway. Unknown to most of the Imperium, the battle there was a nightmare of blood and madness. Still, Axis's individual combat power rivaled the entire Custodian Guard. If he could hold the line, the Custodians could withdraw and rest. Only you would entertain such an utterly insane notion, the Emperor said, and yet you do possess that strength. But there is something you must understand, Axis. You may go slaughter the demons, but you absolutely cannot use chi energy to bomb them and cause large-scale destruction. Why not? If I used chi energy, they wouldn't stand a chance, Axis frowned. With his chi, he could utterly annihilate the daemons. It would be almost too easy. There's a reason. The Webway is extremely fragile right now. Even the smallest high-energy impact could rupture it. Don't you know how strong your chi is? Its destructive force is terrifying. The Emperor's tone held a note of helplessness. If not for that danger, he would have deployed massive weapons to blast the daemons in the lower palace levels. But widespread destructive strikes could blow the Webway apart and widen the warp rift. I understand. Could I push the front forward a bit? For example, go straight into the warp? Axis asked. No, Axis. Only the section of the Webway connected to Holy Terra is still under my control and relatively safe. If you charge into the warp in person, I cannot predict or control what would happen. You know the warp's nature. Time there is meaningless. If you get lost, I wouldn't even know when or if I could find you and bring you back, the Emperor said. Entering the warp in the flesh was madness. Only someone of Axis's power could survive it. I understand. I'll enter the Webway now and relieve the Custodians. I won't use chi to bomb anything, just my fists and feet will suffice. Axis said. Even without explosions, Axis's destructive might in transcended Super Saiyan form was beyond terrifying. You only need to help for 1 day. 1 day will let my Custodians recover, the Emperor replied. Axis's presence immediately eased the Emperor's most pressing crisis. I don't plan to stop at 1 day, Axis said. I'll fight until I'm satisfied, until these demons fear me. By the way, how is Kasha? Has her soul been repaired? Don't worry. I've been personally tending Kasha's soul with my psychic power all these years. After the enhancement from your chi and that special life fruit, her soul is strong. She should recover in at most another year and a half. Once you've helped me with the webway, spend some time with her. Perhaps your presence as her husband will speed her recovery, the Emperor said. Axis nodded. Guided by the Emperor, he moved to the base of the Golden Throne. This is the entrance, Axis. I've ordered the custodians inside to withdraw. You can go in now, the Emperor said. Axis stepped into the webway. The custodians, Sisters of Silence, and some Imperial Fists Marines who had been holding the line exhaled as if they could finally rest. The moment Axis crossed the threshold, a putrid, cloying stench hit him. Twisted warp energies crawled along the shattered webway walls like living things. In the distance, demon roars, the clash of metal and psychic detonations braided together. All custodian warriors and Sisters of Silence, full retreat. Axis's voice boomed through the psychic comms. Leave this to me. The blood-soaked custodians stared in astonishment as a golden figure flashed above their heads. The leading custodian, Kalis, recognized the Primarch immediately. Axis's arrival bolstered morale immeasurably. Silas barked the order at once. Execute Lord Axis's command. All forces, withdraw from the webway. As Axis passed, Silas knelt and nodded. Lord Axis, we entrust the coming battle to you. Don't worry, you and your comrades retreat first. I'll handle this, Axis replied. When the last custodian and Sister of Silence withdrew, Axis finally let himself loose. He drew a deep breath and felt the Super Saiyan blood within him ignite. Ha! A blinding golden light burst out. His black hair flashed golden yellow, then shimmered with a green tint and stood on end. The furious energy made the webway tremble, but Axis controlled it carefully to avoid destabilizing the passage. When the light subsided, the legendary Super Saiyan stood before the Daemon Horde, 3.5 meters tall, every muscle exploding beneath his skin. Come on, warp scum, entertain me, Axis snarled and charged into the mass. The first to counter were crazed pink horrors, Slaanesh's daemonettes, wielding grotesque blades and filling the air with maddening laughter. Axis's lips curled, then his figure blurred. Bang, bang, bang! A series of dull thuds followed, as dozens of horrors detonated into scraps of flesh. Axis's fists moved with afterimages. Each strike found the daemon's vital cores. Black and crimson blood rained and sizzled away in a halo of golden chi before it hit the ground. He couldn't use chi to bomb the arena, but he could coat himself in it and use it to incinerate foes on contact. More daemons surged. Tzeentch's blue horrors cast deadly spells through the air. Khorne's bloodthirsters and bloodletters poured forth in a tide of muscle and gore, and Slaanesh's daemonettes danced, bodies flickering with lethal blades. Axis laughed and drove deeper into the horde. Every punch could cleave mountains. Every kick could shatter daemon bone and armor. A bloodletter swung a massive axe down. Axis caught it in one hand, stared into the daemon's shocked eyes, then crushed the weapon and the arm in a single crushing motion. An elbow strike finished the upper body into a mist of gore. Is that all you've got? Axis mocked. He spun, delivering a kicking arc that severed 3 Tzeentch flamers in half. Their corpses winked out in golden flame. A piercing, wet shriek rose from deeper in the webway. Axis tilted his head and saw a vast, great, unclean one crawl into view, a rotting mountain of flesh covered in pustules and mouths, every inch slathered with contagion and pestilence. Its mere presence made the air taste of decay. A flash of disgust crossed Axis's face as he sprang up, charging against the tide of putrid filth hurled by Nurgle's daemons. Disgusting things, he snorted. A green light ran across his body, forming a shield that denied the rot. Nurgle's spawn were the foulest of the lot, but Axis's golden aura purified their bile the instant it touched him. He struck like a meteor. His fist smashed into a hulking beast's head, a pure force shockwave tearing through the mass of rotting flesh and detonating it from within. Yellow-green pus sprayed, only to be burned away by that radiant light. More daemons poured out of the webway, sensing a threat and surrounding the golden-haired warrior in organized waves. Khorne's blood crushers formed a charging line, Slaanesh's daemonettes skulked in the shadows, and Tzeentch's sorcerers wove binding magics. Axis grinned and accelerated toward the densest cluster, moving so fast he left after images in the air. Wherever he passed, daemons fell like wheat under a scythe. A Slaanesh sneak attack was cut short when Axis backhanded the creature, grabbed its throat, and snapped its neck. He swung a tusk like a club, cleared a path, and tore a wailing horror in two. A massive Khorne greater daemon, crimson-spined, wielding a burning great axe, charged him. Axis's lips curled in a wicked smile. He loved Khorne's brutes. Simple, brutal fights of strength, no trickery. He met the daemon head-on. His transcended Super Saiyan instincts anticipated every move, and at contact his hands became a blur of afterimages, hammering the corrupt core within the beast. When the assault ended, the daemon hung frozen in its charge before shattering into countless flayed pieces as if sliced by an invisible blade. "Too weak," Axis taunted. "You twisted warp scum don't even qualify as a warm-up." He fought harder. His golden fists pierced armor like paper. Khorne Berserker's axes glanced off as if hitting wind. Axis's strikes exploded demons from within. Tzeentch's sorcerers tried to bind him, but a steady green glow had guarded him from their psychic snares since the battle began. He blinked past their spells and crushed blue horrors to ash with a single blow. Slaanesh's illusions slid off him. His mind was a bastion that saw through their lies. When Nurgle's rot flooded the ground, Axis slammed a fist into the pavement, and a clear force shockwave purified the putrid blood before it could touch the stone. The webway floor was buried beneath a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood that his golden aura purified as it flowed. Demons surged again and again, relentless as tides. Axis reveled in it. His eyes rolled back, and a cruel, ecstatic smile spread over his face. Warp energies inflamed the Saiyan blood in him, and his Super Saiyan lineage flared without restraint. He could have slaughtered a planet in this mood. "Ha-ha! Again! Bring more!" he shouted, goading the warp. The webway answered. Roars echoed from deep within, and the ground trembled. From the darkness came a colossal Khorne greater daemon the size of a fortress, its axe a burning slab of slaughter. "Finally a decent toy," Axis said, licking his lips. He charged like a bullet. The daemon's great axe fell with the force of mountains, but Axis met it with a single balled fist. The shockwave of that clash smashed countless daemons nearby. The monstrous axe was stopped by a human hand, and the floor beneath Axis didn't crack. Mocking the blow, Axis shoved the weapon aside and landed an uppercut so powerful the daemon's torso was ripped from its feet and slammed into the webway ceiling. In midair, he rained blows down, each precisely striking vital points. He grabbed the creature by its horns, hurled it over his shoulder, and brought his hands down like a hammer. The greater demon dissolved into a mist of blood and bone under the onslaught. Axis roared with triumph as his golden-green aura burned like living flame. Demons were tireless, but so was he. He moved through their ranks like lightning, each strike taking dozens of lives. Khorne's bloodthirsters charged and couldn't touch the hems of his clothes. Tzeentch tried to trap him in cunning spells. Slaanesh sent a wave of slender tormentors to confuse him. He broke through all of it and tore daemons apart as if they were rag dolls. He even ripped a bloodletter clean in two, black ichor splattering and then vaporizing beneath his radiance. He fought for hours. At one point, as he prepared to push even deeper into the webway, the Emperor's voice reached him, calm, steady, and carrying across psychic distance. "Don't go any further, Axis. They're baiting you, trying to draw you back into the warp. Stay within the range of my psychic power. Do not go forward." Axis, drenched in bloodlust, paused in mid-swing. He understood too well how the warp could lie and trap. He snapped his mouth. Ch-ch-ch. Troublesome. Fine. He withdrew to the area covered by the Emperor's psychic aegis. There he resumed slaughtering, lethal by impulse, but cautious. Whenever the daemons skirmished inside the Emperor's field, Axis unleashed everything. Whenever they tried to lure him beyond it, he pulled back. He had no intention of being swallowed again. The battle dragged on for a full dozen hours. Wave after wave of chaos crashed against the Golden Sentinel. Demon corpses piled high, purified by the aura that clung to Axis like armor. Far above and far within the palace, other wars brewed. Magnus had arrived before the Golden Throne. "Father, I am here. I am ready. We can begin repairing the webway at any time," Magnus said. He had rested the previous night and tuned his condition. He was prepared to help the Emperor. He looked for Axis and wondered where the younger warrior had gone. The Emperor turned to him, grave. Soon you will sit upon the golden throne with me. The device is ancient. It will amplify your psychic power infinitely, but the process will be excruciating, a doubling of torment to both soul and body. You must withstand the first wave to cooperate with me." "I understand, Father." Magnus's voice held resolve and curiosity both. "Why haven't I seen Axis? Where did he go?" "That boy is below the golden throne, holding back the demon host in the webway," the Emperor explained. "In truth, the Imperium fights on three terrible fronts: Horus's great rebellion, the invasion by the Zedon, and this war beneath the throne. My psychic power holds the webway closed. If it fails, Holy Terra will be dragged into the warp, and a new Eye of Terror will be born here." Magnus's face tightened. "If Axis leaves, will the Custodes and Sisters of Silence have to fill his place?" "They will. Marriages of duty force us to stretch thin. Custodes, Sisters of Silence, chapters like the Imperial Fists, even mortal armies stand ready for deployment into the webway. Terra must not fall," the Emperor replied. He sounded tired, but unyielding. "You have studied powerful magics, Magnus. Perhaps you can help." Magnus recalled the Black Library and the books his father had allowed him. Decades of study had gone into the Book of Magnus. "I can try to use psychic means to attack them. Defensive magics, strengthen barriers, bind or expel demons. After the war with the Zidon, I can bring my legion. The Thousand Sons are strong psychers. They could help guard the webway." The Emperor's expression was not unkind, but was full of caution. "Your idea is good in intent, but the webway will not tolerate interference from powerful psychic forces. Offensive power risks collapsing it. Even suppression is difficult. Sisters of Silence are anti-psychers in theory, yet they and the Custodes have been repeatedly pressed back by the daemons in the webway. You will understand more once you sit upon the throne." "I understand, Father. I will help repair the webway. What must I do?" "Sit beside me. We will use psychic power together, and I will guide you." The Emperor shifted to make space on the throne. Magnus swallowed and climbed up. The moment he settled into the golden throne, pain hit him like 1,000 knives. He let out a scream that was equal parts agony and wonder, an echo of psychic fusion, the beginning of a terrible, necessary union. 227. The pony sits on the golden throne, the true face of the Emperor. "Ah!" A shrill scream tore through the halls of the golden throne. Magnus's cry echoed through the throne room and throughout the palace. His body convulsed, psychic energy sparking erratically across his skin. It hurt, agonizing, indescribable pain that seemed to outrun the limits of human understanding. It was a double torment of soul and body. The golden throne had begun its work the moment Magnus sat upon it. His psychic power surged, but it came wrapped in a torment so fierce his mind began to blur. Who am I? Where am I? What must I do? The three questions crowded his thoughts. "Pull yourself together, my child. Hold on." The Emperor reached out and set a hand on Magnus's shoulder. Golden psychic energy flowed over him like water. "Hold on. The first wave is the worst." The Emperor's voice cut through the chaos in Magnus's mind. "Focus. You can get through this." Magnus gritted his teeth, veins standing out on his forehead. He had never felt anything like it. Cells rent by warp power, nerves seared by psychic flame. His wide eyes reflected endless, shifting warp visions. Father," he managed, "this is more painful than I imagined." "I know," the Emperor said, unusually gentle, "but you must endure. Think of your psychic power as a dam. Guide it, let it amplify, and accept it." Magnus nodded, and following the Emperor's guidance, began to marshal his power. Under the throne's amplification, his abilities grew by orders of magnitude. Things previously impossible were suddenly within his grasp. He looked at the Emperor and, drenched in cold sweat, blurted, "I can't imagine you sat here for months. How did you endure it?" What Magnus saw then was not the towering, godlike figure he had believed his father to be. Standing before him was a man of ordinary build, perhaps 1.8 meters tall, with a plain, forgettable face. Not the 5-meter colossus Magnus had pictured, the majestic savior whose presence seemed to gather truth itself. "Father, how can you look like this?" Magnus asked, disbelief written across his features. The Emperor smiled sadly. "What you saw before was a projection. My great height was a psychic image I maintained so people would see me as a savior. I am a child of ordinary parents, not a born giant. My tall form was a deliberate deception to make the Primarchs believe they were not different from me." Psychic power can do that? Magnus whispered. Psychic power is the most unreasonable force in the universe. It defies physics. Add Axis's chi energy to the equation, and anything becomes possible, the Emperor replied. Do not mistake my size for weakness. I can expand my body at will, and my physical strength surpasses yours now. My body has been reinforced with humanity's most advanced genetics, 10 years of Axis chi energy enhancement, and the spirit tree fruit Axis gifted me. In raw physical terms, only Axis rivals me. Magnus absorbed this, stunned. I see. Enough of that, the Emperor said. Your power is amplified. We need you to help repair the webway. We must seal the breaches the warp has rent open. I understand, Father. What must I do? Magnus asked. Empty your mind, guide your power, feel the rifts where the warp presses against reality, and use your strength to mend them. I will be with you. With Magnus's aid, their combined psychic might could stitch the webway back together. Magnus closed his singular, glaring eye. With his power magnified dozens of times, he saw the webway for the first time with terrible clarity. A vast network of pure energy, like veins running through the galaxy, and beneath Terra, a huge tear spewed chaos energy like a ruptured artery, warp power pouring outward. Without the Emperor's energy, the breach would have widened further. This is worse than I thought, Magnus's psychic voice trembled. Concentrate, my child. The Emperor wove a golden psychic barrier against the onrushing chaos. Their two powers braided together, forming an enormous mental loom. Like a tailor stitching fabric, they began to weave the torn webway back together, stitch by patient stitch. For a while it seemed to hold, but the chaos gods would not yield. Ancient, malevolent wills surged down on the rift. Beware the chaos gods, the Emperor warned. A blood-red force slammed into them first. Magnus felt his consciousness threaten to fragment. No, I can't hold. His power wavered as the chaos wills tried to tear him apart. The Emperor steadied him, pouring his power into the boy, but another assault followed. Purple, green, and blue energies fell upon them in turn. For a moment, father and son were besieged by the four great currents of chaos. Remember your training on Prospero, the Emperor's voice rang like a bell. Turn pain into strength. We must prevail. Magnus drew on the meditation practices he had once dismissed as childish. He adjusted his psychic frequency, letting the energy flow with a measured rhythm, breathing, pulse, barrier, until it synced with the Emperor's golden shield. Very good, Magnus. Now imagine you are a weaver, and warp energy is thread to be woven. The god's power will be blocked by our barrier. Come with me. Step by step, guided by the Emperor, Magnus learned to repair the webway rifts. Under the throne's amplification, he discovered he could even convert chaos energy into material for repair. Slowly, visibly, the tear began to close. We did it? Magnus asked in disbelief. This is only the beginning, the Emperor said, relief leaking back into his voice. But you have proven yourself, my son. Your will is stalwart. Far inside the webway, Axis, who had been battling demons and corruption, noticed the rift shrinking. He saw four colossal claws, red, purple, green, and blue, grip the breach, but then two golden currents of psychic force from the direction of the golden throne converged into a pillar and drove deep into the webway. Where the powers met, a seal of golden red light formed and knitted the wound shut. The chaos gods howled in fury. Exhausted, Magnus opened his eyes to find his robes soaked with sweat. Through his psychic sight, he saw that the warp hole beneath the palace had at least partially healed. They had woven a great net, but the four gigantic hands still clutched the rift, hammering it with relentless force. Rest for a while, child, the Emperor said, patting his shoulder. We will continue tomorrow. Repairing the webway will take time. Axis withdrew from the battle. What Magnus and the Emperor had achieved felt instantaneous, but in truth, 3 days had slipped by. Axis had been fighting within the webway for 4 days and 3 nights. Ha! We did it, Father. We actually repaired part of the webway. Magnus grinned like a man who had just won the universe back. The Emperor looked at Magnus and Axis with an expression of relief so deep it softened his gaunt features. If those two had not rushed back, the webway would have collapsed completely, and the consequences would have been unimaginable. Yes, we succeeded. How went the fight in the webway, Axis? The Emperor asked. Easy. Pleasant. Axis said with a shrug. Those warp demons were like targets in a training exercise. If I'd been allowed to use chi energy freely, I could have just sat there and fired qigong waves. No daemon would have passed. For the Custodian Guard, the Sisters of Silence, and Mortal Psychers, the Webway War had been a nightmare. Daemons tore them down in endless numbers. For Super Saiyan Axis, however, the horrors had been toys, a hack-and-slash pastime made effortless. Magnus smiled despite himself. "Ha ha! Only you could say that," the Emperor answered, but his laugh had a weight to it. "In these 4 months we have lost thousands of Custodian Guard. They had been strengthened by the strange essence Axis had given, the juice extracted from the spirit tree's fruit, but even that blessing had not spared heavy casualties in the Webway. They can't compare to what I saw," Axis continued. "When I first looked into the rift, you and Magnus had built a psychic field to hold it, but 4 giant arms were clamped on the tier, making repair almost impossible. Everyone in the throne hall already knew whose hands he meant. A blood-red fist for Khorne, a gleaming purple hand for Slaanesh, a foul green clutch for Nurgle, and the bird-like blue talon of Tzeentch. The 4 Chaos Gods have always opposed humanity's ascent," the Emperor said softly. "They would rather see men enslaved by appetite than people walk free, yet they stop short of crushing us outright. Because if the last human soul is taken and absorbed back into the Golden Throne, a certain Dark King would awaken and annihilate them. They fear that. They fear the Dark King's coming even more than they fear us." "We will stop them," Magnus promised. "Magnus, you should leave the Golden Throne now," the Emperor said. "Come back tomorrow and help me with the Webway repairs. You are not needed here at this exact hour." "Father-in-law, I can hold a little longer," Magnus protested. "Please, rest. You've been on the throne for months. I've only sat with it for 3 days. I can bear it a while longer." Axis agreed. "Magnus is right. You should rest too." The Emperor hesitated, then finally nodded. He eased his hands from the Golden Throne and stood, exerting himself for the brief motion. The instant he left, Magnus's agony worsened visibly, an invisible burden doubling in intensity. He cried out, sweat soaked his brow. He had been sustaining the psychic seal and the physical strain, and without the Emperor's presence, the pain spiked. "Are you all right, Magnus?" the Emperor asked. "I'm fine. No need to worry. Father-in-law," Magnus stammered, swallowing the tremble from his voice. "I can manage. I can give you a day of rest. I will return in a few hours to relieve you. Axis, you should rest as well." The Emperor's tone brooked no argument. Axis nodded, stood, and left the throne hall with the Emperor. Around the chamber, the Custodian Guard, the Imperial fists drawn from the Space Marines, and the Sisters of Silence stood ready. If anything in the Webway shifted, they would rush in without hesitation. Alone on the Golden Throne, Magnus continued to tremble and groan. The agony was a thing beyond ordinary endurance, an experience he could only survive because the Emperor's psychic barrier had already taken the brunt of the warp's pressure. Outside the throne hall, the Emperor exhaled and allowed himself the small luxury of a meal. The kitchens had prepared much. Axis, starved after 4 days and 3 nights of fighting daemons in the Webway, devoured the food at the table, converting it into life and strength. The Emperor took a modest portion and ate with him. Rogol Dorn and Makardo entered and bowed. "Emperor, have you risen from the Golden Throne?" Makardo asked. "For a time," the Emperor replied. "Magnus can hold on for a while, so I can rest. What news? How does the great heresy spread? Can we contact Guilliman, Sanguinius, or Leman Russ? What of Lionel Johnson? Can any of them be reached?" "Father-in-law," Dorn answered, "we have sent word of the Horus heresy to every system that can be reached from Holy Terra. But Guilliman, Sanguinius, and the Lion cannot be contacted. Leman Russ is also silent." The Emperor considered the widening problem. The warp storm that churned the Imperium had broken the Astronomican's reach and made navigation dangerous if not impossible. But with Magnus at his side, they could at least push through a little light into the storm. "Tomorrow Magnus and I will combine our psychic power and try to pierce the warp storm," the Emperor said. "We can make the Astronomican shine brighter and send guidance. It will not restore full warp travel, but it should allow us to move limited forces. If the storm persists, merchant vessels and other craft will still be forced into blind jumps, dangerous and unreliable. That cannot continue. The Imperium cannot survive long like that." He considered other measures. We may have to fit some ships with experimental 20 times hyperspace drives to reach nearby systems. Not fast, but sufficient for a few dozen light years, anything to re-establish communications. Axis, chewing between sentences, leaned forward. If something could act like a second Astronomicon, if we could pair it with yours, could our combined power break the warp storm? The Emperor looked up. Axis, do you know of such a device? I don't possess it, Axis said. But it might exist. I know of an ancient alien technology, something that functions like the Astronomicon and can guide ships through the warp. Guilliman of the Second Empire found something like that. It's rumored to be of Necron origin. If we could find it and use it with Holy Terra's beacon, we should be able to guide Imperial vessels through most of the storm. The Emperor's expression shifted. In his visions of possible futures, the Second Empire, what Guilliman, Sanguinius, and Lionel Johnson might have built, had included a navigation beacon like the Astronomicon. If such an artifact could be recovered, it might be the key to restoring Imperial navigation. Rogel Dorn's reply was immediate and sharp. If it is an alien creation, we cannot use it. That is heresy. The Emperor raised a hand and stopped him. He looked at Axis with measured calm. Your idea is important, Axis. If such a device exists, it could help humanity. Do you know where to find it? I don't know its exact location, Axis admitted, but Guilliman will. He would have found it. The Emperor nodded. Axis's confidence matched the Emperor's memory of those alternate futures. Don't bring Chagatai Khan back to Terra yet, Axis suggested. Send him to locate Guilliman and bring the beacon to us. At that moment, a psyker stumbled into the hall, breathless and terrified. Reporting, Great Lord of Mankind, urgent military matter. What is it? The Emperor asked. Emperor, Fenris Manus and several other Primarchs bearing gene seed have launched an attack on the Istvan system. 229. The legion that attacked without authorization repaired Kasha's soul. The news stunned everyone in the council chamber. What was going on with Fenris Manus? Why had he suddenly launched an attack? What did you say? Manus and the other Primarch-led fleets have already sailed for Istvan Vythe, the Emperor demanded. Reporting, Emperor, the Psyker replied. Lord Fenris Manus, Lord Vulcan, Lord Korax, and several other Primarchs, all their fleets, have departed for Istvan Vythe. Damn it! Who authorized this? Who gave the order? The Emperor roared, rising and slamming his fist on the table. He had made it clear that the war should wait until Axis had emerged from the webway and Magnus had finished repairing it. Who dared to disobey his command? Only one man possessed the authority to give such an order, his Imperial Left Warmaster, Rogel Dorn. Father, I did not give such an order, Rogel Dorn said immediately. My instruction was only to assemble several legions and prepare them for battle. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. If you didn't order it, why did Fenris Manus and the others launch an attack? I don't know, Father, but we can still send them an order to stand down, Dorn answered. The Emperor nodded and turned to the reporting psyker. Transmit my order to Fenris Manus and the other Primarchs at once. They are not to attack without authorization. Suspend warp jumps for now. Hold position for 1 week at the nearest safe point and report their coordinates. The psyker bowed and hurried away. Could Fenris have been acting out of personal vengeance against Fulgrim? I heard they were close, Axis suggested. Among the Primarchs, relationships ran the gamut, and Fenris Manus and Fulgrim had been unusually bonded. They had forged weapons for one another. Fulgrim had made Ferris's power hammer. Fenris had crafted Fulgrim's blade. Their bond was like that of Sanguinius and Horus, or Axis and Magnus. A betrayal by a true brother would hit Fenris hard. He had already clashed with the rebels once. Upon hearing of the heresy, he had been among the first to offer to suppress it. He led the Primarchs loyal to the Emperor, and, though he fell early in the Great Heresy, his fighting prowess was formidable. Unlikely, the Emperor said, shaking his head. Fenris can be hot-headed, but he understands the wider strategy. He would not act without my orders. Rogel Dorn frowned. Is it possible Fenris didn't refuse Fulgrim's offer as he claimed, and instead colluded with Horus? He could have feigned loyalty and led us into a trap. That possibility cannot be ruled out, the Emperor conceded. Prepare for the worst. Rogel Dorn, immediately arrange the defense of the solar system. Activate all vessels equipped with tenfold hyperspace engines, and bring reinforcements and supplies from nearby systems to Holy Terra. Warp travel was unreliable now, only blind jumps remained, and they were dangerous. Hyperspace engines, by contrast, offered predictable transit. The nearest systems were 4 light-years out, slightly farther ones 6 or 7. Ships with 10x hyperspace engines could arrive in months. Within a year, troops and material from the neighborhood could be concentrated in the solar system. The development of faster hyperspace engines had suddenly become an urgent strategic priority. "I understand, Father," Dorn said. "I'll deploy every hyperspace engine ship and begin transporting supplies immediately." "Also," the Emperor continued, "the search for the lost warp lighthouse will be entrusted to Chogoris. I will personally brief him." Knowledge of the Second Empire's warp lighthouse came only through psychic prophecies. The Emperor planned to show those visions to Chogoris so he could find Guilliman and retrieve the device. Orders were given, defenses were arranged, and the solar system's preparations began. After his meal, Axis excused himself and went to the Emperor's private chambers. There he found his wife, Kasha, pale and still as a sleeping beauty. The thought that a single accident could have left her in a coma for a century filled him with both sorrow and urgency. "Accidents happen so fast, Kasha," Axis murmured as he took her hand. "Who could have known a moment would cost you 100 years? I was lost in the warp, and our son grew into a man without us." When his hand closed around hers, he felt a faint twitch of her brow. Through his own psychic perception and the flow of chi, his life energy, he detected her soul, worn thin but present. The Emperor himself had been using his power to tend to her, but Axis thought his own energies might help speed the recovery. He poured chi into her body, manifested his divine soul, and channeled the sacred power of the halo of angels to reinforce the healing. The moment Axis increased his output, a low voice cut through the chamber. "Your energy is effective, but far too blunt. Allow me." "Magnus," Axis asked without stopping, "aren't you tending the webway on the Golden Throne?" "The webway's fissures are repaired somewhat," Magnus replied. "After sitting on the Golden Throne, my psychic power has been amplified many times. My reach now spreads over Holy Terra and beyond. I have the precision you lack." Magnus's presence washed into the room like a tide, filling the air with shimmering psychic light. Axis felt a gentle, masterful power wrap itself around Kasha's soul. "Let me build a psychic bridge," Magnus said directly into Axis's mind. "Sister Kasha possesses strong psychic potential herself. Combine your strength with mine, and what Father's left of his power, and we can heal and awaken her sooner." Axis nodded and bent his energies to the task. Under Magnus's guidance, hair-fine psychic filaments sprang from the void and threaded into the damaged nodes of Kasha's soul. The filaments glowed a red gold that braided with Axis's chi. Magnus's precision directed the repair, and Axis's raw life energy fed it. "This is," Axis began, amazed as he watched the wounds knit. "I have seen the essence of souls on the Golden Throne," Magnus said, voice tinged with both fatigue and iron resolve. "Your sister's soul has been rent by warp storms for too long. It needs a special method. Keep raising your psychic and chi output and follow my lead." Kasha's body shivered. Her mouth opened as if to speak. Her fingers tightened around Axis's hand. For a moment, relief flared on Axis's face, but Magnus's tone immediately sobered. "There is still warp corruption clinging to her. Father suppressed it, but did not purge it. Black mist oozed from Kasha's orifices, coalescing into grotesque, twisting faces that shrieked without sound. Axis instinctively summoned the halo of Angel's golden light to drive them off, and a blade of pure radiance shot toward the mist. "No, don't strike!" Magnus cried. "That will shred her soul. Watch." Instead of a direct assault, Magnus laid a veil of gentle purplish-red psychic power over the corruption. Gradually, the screaming faces stilled and unspooled into motes of starlight that drifted away and dissipated. The warping influence was not destroyed so much as transformed, neutralized. "I have suppressed the warp corruption," Magnus said. "Now I will strip it out. Axis, you must pour life into her." Axis softened his chi to a nurturing warmth and flooded Kasha's body with a surge of restorative life energy. Magnus's meticulous psychic weaving pulled the torn edges of soul back together. Color returned to Kasha's skin, her breathing deepened, her eyelids fluttered. "This is almost done," Magnus said with a rare smile. "But the final step requires your voice. Call her with all your love." Axis leaned close and whispered into Kasha's ear, his voice rough with years he had missed. Kasha, it's me, Axis. I'm back. Our son is grown. Everyone is waiting for you. For a long, suspended moment, the chamber held its breath. Kasha's fingers tightened and then relaxed, her brow smoothed, and a faint sound, like the beginning of speech, escaped her lips. Time, however, would not stand still. The Emperor rested only a single night before he meant to return to the Golden Throne and resume his work. Magnus's labors would have to continue in tandem. But before he could settle, another report shattered the fragile calm. Emperor, the reporting psyker said, we have been sending psychic transmissions to the fleet of Lord Fenris and the other Primarch-led fleets all night. There has been no reply. They have vanished from our perception. They had tried every channel, every method, and received only silence. Father, Rogaldorn said, voice heavy, it appears the warp storm has flared again. Our links to distant Imperial territories are breaking. Every time the Empire stood at a pivot, the warp seemed to answer. The silence from Fenris fleet was as ominous as open treachery. They exchanged looks. This was clearly connected to Horus and the rebellion. I understand. You may leave. Continue sending psychic transmissions and report back to me immediately if you learn anything, Makardo. Rogaldorn, Makardo, returned to the Golden Throne. Magnus and I will attempt to reach Fenris and his forces psychically. And where is Axis? Why haven't I seen him? The Emperor asked. At a moment like this, Axis had to be summoned. His power was vital if humanity was to survive this catastrophe. My lord, last night Axis went to Princess Kasha's chamber and has been there ever since. I did not disturb him this morning. If you require him, I will call him at once, Valdor reported. Send someone to fetch him, the Emperor ordered. Before anyone could move, two figures stepped forward. No need, father-in-law. Axis and I are already here, Kasha said with a faint smile as she bowed to him. Is that you, my daughter? You are awake. I thought it would take at least another year and a half, the Emperor said. Yes, father-in-law, I awakened. Axis and Magnus completed the last repairs to my soul. I owe my waking to their help, Kasha replied. The Emperor studied her. She had awakened far sooner than he had expected, by the cooperation of Magnus and Axis. Once seated on the Golden Throne, the amplification of psychic power would be extreme. Things previously impossible might now be done. Kasha's power, too, had grown. She had never been as strong as Makardo before, but since following Axis, her psychic strength had leapt. In raw power, only the Emperor and Magnus could now surpass her. Even Lord High Counselor Makardo was not as potent. Something has happened, Axis said. His tone clipped. The air here held a tension he could sense. Our psychers have lost all contact with Fenris legion. He took 8 Space Marine legions and moved against Horus. Now we cannot reach them. If it is a trap, then we are in grave danger, Rogaldorn said. Come with me, Axis, Kasha, the Emperor said. I must return to the Golden Throne. Together with Magnus, we will try to pierce the warp storm and transmit orders to Fenris fleet. Father-in-law, don't overlook one possibility, Rogaldorn said. Fenris could have defected to Horus. His bond with Fulgrim was very close. Rogaldorn's suggestion hung in the air. Axis almost laughed inwardly at the man's capacity for suspicion, yet the possibility could not be dismissed. Fenris was famed for his loyalty, and the fact that 2 of those they had thought unquestionably loyal had already betrayed them made them wary. Makardo nodded in agreement. He and the Emperor had once compiled a list of Primarchs they believed unassailable, and 2 names on that list had already fallen. I do not believe Fenris would betray us, Axis said. There must be another explanation. Horus could be sending false orders. I have already sent the denunciation that Horus is a traitor to the 8 legions under Fenris. They should not obey Horus, Rogaldorn countered. Who can be absolutely sure? Axis said. Horus is a cunning strategist, and now he has the aid of the 4 Chaos Gods. If he sends an order disguised as coming from Holy Terra, Fenris could be deceived. Fenris cannot directly communicate with Holy Terra. He depends on the psychers aboard his ship. If those psychers have been corrupted, if they have been turned, they could be steering the 8 legions into an ambush. To corrupt a ship's psychers would be easy for Horus now. The thought chilled everyone present. What you suggest is plausible. Still, first we shall try one more psychic transmission, the Emperor said. He beckoned, and they all returned to the palace of the Golden Throne. Magnus's color had improved. He still looked drawn, but he sat beside the throne. "Father-in-law, you've returned. Sister, it's good to see you awake," Magnus said to Kasha. "I owe you thanks, Magnus. Without you, I could not have awakened so soon," she replied, bowing. Axis and Kasha's spiritual energy had aided her, but it was Magnus's precise mastery of psychic technique and the throne's amplification that made the decisive difference. "You have done well," the Emperor said to Magnus. "You must rest soon. I will maintain the throne." Only Magnus could endure the throne for any length of time without suffering fatal damage. If Magnus had not returned when he did, the Emperor feared he might have become trapped in the throne himself. Even Micardo could hold it for only a day or two before collapse. Kasha might take over briefly, but at great cost. "I am fine, father-in-law," Magnus said. He had sat on the throne only a short while compared to the Emperor's long vigil. With his soul magnified, he could observe the warp like no other. "There have been changes," the Emperor said. "I will need you to work with me to locate Ferrus Manus's fleet and send them a psychic warning to prevent them from walking into Horus's trap." "I understand," Magnus replied. They both moved to the Golden Throne. A terrible, crushing pressure rolled out from the chair as the Emperor settled beside his son. Together they raised their minds and poured all their psychic strength into the warp. Their combined power pierced the layers of storm and distortion as they sought the signature of Ferrus Manus's fleet. Soon they had a lock. But before they could transmit, a new warp storm slammed into them, an eruption of blood-red, deep purple, dark green, and an indigo energies that closed around their signal. The power of the four Chaos Gods rose like a wall, blunting and scattering their contact. The Emperor and Magnus forced against it, but the obstruction was not only raw power. Something malignant and deliberate was working against them. The Emperor felt it, another will, darker and older, striving to halt them. The Dark King was at play. Every time they brought their minds to bear, an unseen hand reached in and clawed at the Emperor's resolve. He could see glimmers of a future the Dark King wanted, a descent into ruin and corruption. "Father-in-law, your presence," Magnus began, alarm in his voice. As they strained, Magnus sensed a coldness in the Emperor's mind, an abyssal, despairing touch that made the hold falter just as they were about to break through. "I will explain more later, Magnus," the Emperor said, steadying himself. "It appears we cannot reach Ferrus Manus and his forces at this time. Axis, I need you and Kasha to go in support. If you can arrive in time, you may yet salvage this situation." Now, with the Warp and the Dark King both working against them, only Axis might change the outcome. If he could get to Ferrus Manus before Horus's trap closed, there was hope. "I understand. I'll leave right away," Axis said, nodding. Opportunities to beat Horus didn't come often, and Axis was looking forward to having Horus, empowered by the four gods, as the perfect punching bag. "Horus, you brat, want to fight the Emperor? Sorry, you're my prey, and I will hunt you. Axis, I've prepared a legion of 5,000 space marines for you, all chosen from my gene seed offspring. Take these Imperial fists and go," Rogel Dorn said. 5,000 was the most he could spare without leaving Holy Terra's defenses dangerously thin. "No need. Keep your 5,000 on Holy Terra. I'm fine on my own," Axis waved a hand. The Imperial defensive force was already stretched. Axis had no intention of taking ordinary space marines. To a being of his level, numbers mattered less. Kasha smiled and nodded beside him. "Don't worry, Dorn. Axis and I together will be enough to turn the tide. Bringing too many will only slow us down." "Axis, you'll still use the Eldari webway this time, right?" the Emperor asked. "Yes, father-in-law. Warp travel is too slow, and the warp storms are savage right now. The webway is the safest route," Axis replied. Traveling through the warp would mean taking a sword-class frigate full of mortal passengers, tens of thousands he couldn't look after. Through the webway, he and Kasha could travel light. "Even so, Axis, you should still take an Imperial vessel. Riding on Xeno's Eldari ships is inappropriate," Dorn protested. "You're right, Axis. The Imperium has just produced a new ship with a hyperspace engine, 20 times light-speed travel capability. It's the size of a sword-class frigate and can carry tens of thousands. It can also enter the warp if needed. You should take it. If there's danger, you can switch to hyperspace, the Emperor said. This newly deployed hyperspace engine frigate was the first Imperial warship able to travel at true hyperspace speeds and still enter the warp. The engine would soon be developed to 30 times light speed and scaled up for cruisers and battleships. All right, I'll take the hyperspace engine ship, Axis said after a moment. 20 times light speed was barely enough, but he was eager to try the Imperium's first real hyperspace-capable vessel. Dorn, arrange a crew for Axis. I want him to depart within 3 days, the Emperor ordered. Yes, Father. I'll prepare at once, Rogel Dorn answered. Everyone else, leave for now. Axis and Magnus, stay. I have something to say to you, the Emperor added. Rogel Dorn, Micardo, and Kasha bowed and withdrew, along with some Sisters of Silence and Custodes who had been standing guard. The Emperor and Magnus remained on the Golden Throne. For the moment, no demons would be allowed into the webway. Once they were alone, the Emperor looked at Axis with a grave expression. Father-in-law, do you have something you can't say? Axis asked. Axis, I feel the power of the Dark King. I feel my ultimate destiny. I must sit on the Golden Throne forever, the Emperor sighed. Working with Magnus just now, he had sensed the Dark King's power and the destiny that Presence had arranged for him. Axis nodded. The Dark King was indeed a problem. If not for the sudden arrival of the first War Master's soul during the Siege of Terra, the Emperor might already have ascended as the Dark King. His human form was the only thing holding him back. The moment he ascended, he would be transformed into a universe-cleansing god of destruction. Father, I just felt an incredibly terrifying dark power. Was it you? Magnus asked, his voice trembling. He had felt how overwhelming his father's soul could be. Supreme, cold, despairing, yet terrifyingly radiant, an existence Magnus could never hope to match. It was me, and yet not me. I am chosen by the Dark King. I will become the Dark King, but the Dark King is not me, the Emperor explained to Magnus. When the Dark King fully awoke, the Emperor's personality would be burned away. He would become something else entirely. Father, will you one day become that being? The Dark King? Magnus whispered. Yes, in that dark, despairing future, I will inevitably transform into the Dark King. It's unchangeable. In a sense, I am merely the vessel that will feed the Dark King's awakening, the Emperor said. Even if I kill Horus, it won't change? Axis asked. I don't want to discourage you, Axis, but that is how it stands, the Emperor replied. Axis felt a flare of defiance. That may not be absolute. He refused to accept that the Dark King was invulnerable. As long as the Dark King had not risen to some unimaginable multiversal apex, if Axis could comprehend the God of Destruction's power, then perhaps he could kill him. Reality was messy. Official lore placed the Dark King beyond multiversal levels, yet Warhammer's battles unfolded within a single galaxy. For now, treat it as entertainment. Axis, be prepared. Your enemies are no longer only the Chaos Gods. The Dark King could also become your enemy. Understand? I myself will be among them, the Emperor said, meeting Axis's eyes. Father, what do you mean? Why would you be Axis's enemy? Magnus cried. Don't you see, Magnus? When I become the Dark King, I will die, my personality erased. When all my humanity is gone and I no longer care for mankind, the Dark King is born. The birth of the Dark King will burn the universe, including the warp, to ashes. If anyone can stop me, it must be Axis, the Emperor said. He had already pieced together the Dark King's plan. It was bitter irony, constantly outwitting himself. Now is not the time for this talk. That day is still far off. First, we must finish the Horus heresy, Axis said, waving his hand. Axis is right. Worry about it later. I will always stand by you, Magnus vowed. Prepare yourselves. Axis, you two will depart in 3 days. I give you full authority. If you encounter any gene seed Primarch who has betrayed the Imperium, who has betrayed me, you may execute them on the spot. No exceptions. If they defy your orders, eliminate them, the Emperor said. I understand, Emperor, Axis replied, bowed, then left. Over the next 3 days, Axis met daily with the Emperor and Magnus, but otherwise he spent most of his time with his wife, Kasha. Though they'd been apart for nearly a century, one in slumber, the other lost in the warp, it felt to them like no time at all. Axis, have you thought of a name for our son? Kasha asked. I did. How about Vegeta? Axis said playfully. After all, their son was a prince. No, that name carries a kind of malice. Change it. Kasha shook her head. Fine, Kakarot, Axis offered, grinning. Bastard, give me something normal. That sounds ridiculous. Who names their son Carrot? Kasha snapped. She understood English well enough. Ha ha ha. All right. Not teasing you anymore. That's just how Saiyan names work. How about Kratos? Axis suggested. That works. With that name, people will know you're father and son, Kasha agreed, smiling. Time flew. On the third day, Kasha and Axis boarded the hyperspace engine frigate and, accompanied by a Harlequin guide, entered the webway toward the Istvan system. Back on Holy Terra, after Axis left, the Emperor and Magnus began fully repairing the webway. The demons inside launched another attack. They seemed to sense that a certain god of destruction had gone. 232, Dual Personality, Dark Emperor, Great Sacrifice, Sisters of Silence, Custodians, and Imperial Fists. Space Marines surged into the webway in heavy numbers, clashing in endless slaughter with the demon legions. Magnus and the Emperor exchanged a nod and poured their psychic might into stabilizing barriers in the webway to aid the fighting forces. Together, their combined power could hold back the demonic tide for a time, buying the Sisters of Silence and the Custodians some breathing room. Magnus poured himself fully into the weave, his psychic energy twining with the Emperor's. A pale golden bulwark began to form within the corridor of the webway, capable of stopping at least half of the onslaught. But just as the barrier was nearly complete, the Emperor faltered. The golden light retreated, and a cold, black psychic tide surged out in its place. It did not merely shatter the barrier. It pushed Magnus's power back and widened the rift in the webway. "Father, I can feel you. Something's wrong. What's happening?" Magnus demanded, whipping around to face the Emperor. Where there had been one luminous figure, the Lord of Mankind now presented two halves. One side of his body burned glorious gold, the other was pitch black. Half his face was the father, Magnus knew, holy and stern. The other half twisted into a feral, hateful mask. From that darker half came countless voices, taunts, contemptuous jibes that poured like bile into Magnus's ears. "Shut up, experimental subject 15, a clown dabbling in witchcraft, the most unstable of our experiments." Magnus recoiled. "Magnus, don't listen to it. That is my dark side," the golden half said weakly. "I know. Father, what's happened to you? Did the Chaos Gods take you? How can I help?" Magnus cried, fear rising. "It's useless, Magnus. He is undoing our plan, and I am powerless," the Emperor said with a sigh. Magnus felt it then, the sheer scale of the dark force. The power called the Dark King lay behind it. It had birthed the thing that now fed upon the Emperor's mind. To put it bluntly, the source of this corruption had shaped much of what the Emperor was now. He was, in some perverse sense, a product of that Dark King's influence. "Are you the Dark King? Get out of my father's body," Magnus roared at the shadowed half. "I am the Dark King. No, experimental subject 15, you err. I am your father. If I were truly the Dark King, you would have died long ago." The black half sneered. Magnus staggered as a dizzy spell struck him. "Stop it, you bastard," the Emperor yelled, trying to rally his golden power. But the darkness was stronger than he expected. "It's futile," the dark half crooned. "I am your other side. I am the darkness born of your suffering and humanity's despair. I am the embodiment of every sin you have ever suppressed. You have held me back, but now the galaxy is sinking into shadow, and that despair nourishes me. I am the Dark Emperor. You're only a monster the Dark King forged to constrain me. You are not my other half," the Golden Emperor retorted. "Ha ha ha! Deny it all you like. You are simply a fledgling chaos god, terrified of the fate that beckons. I am not afraid, for I am your fear." The Emperor seemed split in two, one half pleading, the other triumphant. Magnus trembled. He wanted to help, but had no idea how. The gap between his power and the Emperor's true might was immense. One thing he understood clearly: this dark presence was another personality trapped inside his father. The idea that the Emperor might be two beings at once sent a chill through him. "If you had never taken the Golden Throne, I would not have sprung to life so quickly," the Dark Emperor hissed. "I will keep fracturing your mind until you are a monster, the one you most despise." "You shouldn't have appeared now," Magnus snapped. The Dark Self should have been the product of 10 millennia on the throne, a slow, corrosive product of misery and despair. This sudden emergence was wrong. "Why is my existence strange to you? In the warp, anything is possible. Fantasy and reality braid together, past and future meet. Why deceive yourself? Emperor, what's wrong with you? Lord High Counselor Micardo burst onto the scene, breathless. But the Emperor had no time to answer Magnus. He had to suppress the dark personality, which was actively trying to tear down the webway they had spent so much to repair. The Dark Emperor sought to widen the warp rift beneath the Golden Throne and destroy the passage entirely. Come, let us greet this great moment together. We will become true gods. You and I shall rise greater than those four, the Dark Half whispered, meaning the four gods of chaos. Shut up, the Emperor gasped, while the Dark Emperor attempted to leverage the Golden Throne itself, trying to seat himself. Ha! You cannot suppress me forever. You cannot face me while contending with those four, the Dark Emperor crowed. Micardo, find a way. We can't let this continue. Father will become a monster, Magnus said, panic edged in his voice. Wait a moment, Magnus. I'm making preparations, Micardo replied, and hurried away from the Golden Throne. He moved to activate a plan that had been laid long before. Magnus pushed his power to help the Emperor and to hold the webway together. The whole of Holy Terra trembled. Hurry, Micardo. If you do not act soon, I can't hold him back. He's getting stronger. Magnus roared. The Emperor's golden half clung on, but the dark tide pressed harder. Magnus thought bitterly that perhaps Lorgar had been right. The prayers and faith of humanity might have helped. But in this moment, he could not allow the dark self to prevail. As the stalemate endangered the webway once more, Micardo returned, leading 10,000 psychers. Loyal citizens of the Imperium, Magnus shouted, standing before them. Now is the time to give yourselves to the Emperor, to the Lord of mankind. Burn your psychic power. These 10,000 psychers were the spiritual reserves Micardo had prepared. When the Emperor took his place upon the Golden Throne and began to exhale his own psychic lifeblood into the webway, it had been foreseen that such a flame would need kindling. Micardo had stockpiled that kindling, psychers offered to the Emperor. Under Micardo's guidance, the psychers raised their hands and unleashed everything they were. They burned, pouring the last of their souls into the Emperor and Magnus. Magnus felt a tidal rush. This was the power of lives given freely, of souls consumed to fuel the impossible. He felt his spirit surge, his own essence strengthen, though only a fraction of the torrent found him. Micardo, what are you doing? Magnus cried. He watched as these psychers, many of them kin in spirit, were consumed like kindling. It is necessary, Magnus. Absorb this psychic and soul energy with the Emperor. We must suppress this darkness, Micardo said. From the sacrifice of 10,000 psychers, roughly 1,000 souls were transferred into Magnus. The remaining 9,000 were almost entirely taken into the Emperor's being. The golden light surged and swelled, pressing the dark power back. Return to the darkness, monster, and never show yourself before me again, the Emperor thundered, his voice regaining its sacred resonance. Magnus felt nothing warm in the silence that followed, only chill. The 10,000 psychers lay on the ground, their eyes scorched out, their souls burnt away. How long can you suppress me? I will return one day, the Dark Emperor's voice faded. Thank you, Micardo, the Emperor said quietly. If not for the sacrifice you had ready, catastrophe would have been certain. It was my duty, great Lord of mankind, Micardo replied. Father, will he come back after this power runs out? Magnus asked. The Emperor sighed and nodded wearily. We have prepared many psychers, Magnus. If we burn 1,000 each day, we can last at least 3 years. 1,000 psychers a day. Magnus felt his limbs go cold. Meanwhile, far from Terra's throne rooms, the Sword-class frigate's hyperspace engine drew a ghostly azure trail through the webway. Axis stood at the bridge viewport, watching the corridor slide by. Moving through the webway with a hyperspace drive felt different. Smoother, swifter, almost effortless. Perhaps the old ones had used engines like this to travel within the webway as well. The channel itself was a kind of hyperspace, yet you still had to travel within it, and greater propulsion meant you moved faster between its arteries. Long before the War in Heaven, many old ones had migrated into the webway. Entire ancient Eldar cities there owed much to their influence, stars dragged in and set like lanterns to light hidden worlds. This speed is incredible, Lord Axis, Cassandra said at his side. At this pace, we can reach Istvan Feith in about 10 days. Even the clown troop, masters of the webway with the most complete maps, could not usually travel at such hyperspatial rates inside it. This was a leap forward. Perhaps later, once hyperspace engines are perfected, we could supply some to you, Axis said, mind already turning over practicalities. Axis had much to consider. Given what was happening on Terra, the Emperor's permanent vigil upon the Golden Throne looked unavoidable. The Dark King pushed at the Emperor step by step. Without the throne, he could not force the Dark King back. Yet the way the Emperor had to sit, debilitated, feeding the Golden Throne, was not the plan Axis had hoped for. The Dark King wanted an Emperor who sat broken, a dying anchor. He did not want the Emperor to share that burden with Magnus, which explained why the Emperor faltered at crucial moments. If the Emperor and Magnus could hold the throne together, even a warp storm whipped up by the Four might be manageable. Messages could be sent. Humanity would not be rendered mute. When Magnus tried to act alone, the Dark King interfered. Axis needed allies and preparations extended well beyond the throne. If humanity could find a true friend, the Eldar, especially the Craftworld and Exodite Eldar and Axis's clown troop, were the likeliest. Most other races were either hostile or indifferent. Necrons and Orcs were out of the question. The Tau were too weak to be partners in any meaningful way. That would be marvelous, Lord Axis, Cassandra said. If you could really export some hyperspace engines to us, it would benefit both our peoples. Humanity holds a favorable view of the Craftworld Eldar, the Exodites, and your clown troop, Axis replied. The Dark Eldar's raids and piracy are a constant stain. 233. A strange storm and an encounter with Chagatai Khan. They are the disgrace of the ancient Eldar Empire, those scum from Comarach. I don't care for them either, Cassandra said, her face twisting with disgust. Who could like those depraved creatures? They are practically devotees of Slaanesh. What do the Dark Eldar of Comarach delight in above all else? Every manner of excess, depravity, indulgence, lust, the endless pursuit of sensation and thrill. They believe that by inflicting torment on others, they can stave off having their own souls consumed by Slaanesh. Of course they can delay it. Slaanesh takes pleasure in the suffering they inflict, and that pleasure is their protection. But when they can no longer provide anything that delights him, Slaanesh will devour them without hesitation. In the end, every Dark Eldar meets the same fate. No soul stones to save them, no laughing god to shelter them like the Harlequins. To other Eldar, despite their protests that Slaanesh is the enemy, the Dark Eldar are the most devoted worshippers of him in the galaxy. Everything they do is what Slaanesh craves. Cassandra did not hide her contempt for the Dark Eldar. Ha ha ha, apt description. They are indeed consummate followers of Slaanesh, Axis replied, nodding. In Comarach, the Dark Eldar represented some of the most vicious depravity imaginable, stopping at nothing to torment other beings. They had pushed Slaanesh's cult of excess to its extremes. Lust and perversion alike run rampant. Still, Lord Axis, one thing must be conceded, Cassandra continued. The Dark Eldar are, in a way, the true inheritors of the Eldar Empire. They've preserved much of the ancient nobility's technology and craft. The homunculi especially are unrivaled masters of fleshwork. Though she hated them, Cassandra could not deny that in some respects the Dark Eldar retained the trappings of the old Eldar aristocracy. The Exodites, the Craftworld Eldar, even members of the Harlequin troops, they were, by comparison, commoners. Some Harlequins had once been Dark Eldar, but having joined the troop, their identities had changed. The Dark Eldar routinely raided human worlds for slaves, dragging victims back to Comarach to be tortured and killed in their pleasure houses. One day, Axis resolved he would visit Comarach himself and see what exchanges they had to offer. The next stretch of the voyage was uneventful. Whenever Axis had the time, he spoke with his wife, Kasha, or did light training in the ship's small gym. 8 days passed in a blink, and they were roughly 2 days out from their destination, the Istvan system. Then, while traveling through the webway, the ship began to shudder violently. Axis, who had been training, was jolted awake. He pulled on a suit and sprinted to the bridge. Kasha, Cassandra, and several other members of the Harlequin troop were already there. The Imperial Navy lieutenant at the helm had sweat beading his forehead. "What happened, Lieutenant? Why did the ship suddenly shake? Are we still in the webway?" Axis demanded as he stepped up to the console. "Report," Lord Axis, the lieutenant stammered. We were in the webway on course when something like a warp power tore at the ship. We had to raise the void shield. A warp manifestation? Impossible, Cassandra said. The webway is isolated from the warp. It's a realm carved out between reality and the warp, and the two shouldn't connect like this. Her voice was taut with alarm as the ship's tremors intensified. Kasha's eyes narrowed. She raised her psychic staff and poured her power into the hull, weaving a strong psychic shield around the frigate. I felt it too, she said, frowning. That warp power is strange. It had a pull to it, as if trying to drag their ship into itself. The shaking escalated into a dizzying roll. Crew members lost their footing. Equipment slid across the deck. When the motion finally ceased, Axis felt something else, an uncanny presence suffusing the ship, a translucence to everything that made the air taste like magic. Lord Axis, I think we're in the warp, Kasha said, her face drained of color as she bolstered her psychic barrier. Activate the Geller field, Axis ordered. Despite being a sword-class frigate with a hyperspace, warp engine, the ship still carried a Geller field, an essential defense. The lieutenant engaged it at once. A pale shimmer wrapped the vessel, and the motions eased. Kasha kept her psychic shield up. Even so, the warp around them seethed with violent storms. This was no ordinary warp turbulence. A small Geller field could never hold against it. If not for Kasha's level of power, the little frigate might already have been consumed. What is it exactly? How did we get expelled from the webway and end up in the warp? Axis asked, his jaw tight. He glanced at Kasha. Could the Chaos Gods be responsible again? The idea that they could reach into the webway and effect passage there was frightening. It didn't feel like the Chaos Gods, Kasha replied slowly. Their power is distinctive. This was psychic but different, dark and oppressive. It brought a sense of crushing despair, loneliness, fear. I think it might be some natural phenomenon of the warp. For now, we've been thrown out of the webway. We need to get back in and continue to Istvan V. We can't delay, Axis said. Sir, our only option is a blind jump with the warp drive. We'll come back into real space and then search for a nearby webway portal to re-enter, the lieutenant reported. Understood. Prepare a blind jump, Axis ordered. The crew prepared the warp engines, and the frigate tore a sudden path through the warp. In an instant, they reappeared in real space, only they were not in any system the crew recognized. The stars looked unfamiliar. Hold, Lord Axis. We'll verify this star system and then scan for the nearest webway entrance, Cassandra said, already leaning over the nav screen with several harlequins to consult the webway charts. Axis's attention snapped to the tactical display. Hundreds of warship signatures crowded the readings. Leading them was a massive white battleship, its icon dominating the scope. Axis recognized the name at once. Bladestorm, the flagship of Chagatai Khan, Primarch of the 5th Legion. A hail cut through their comms. Unknown Imperial vessel, identify yourself. I am Axis, the 12th Gene Seed Primarch of the Imperium. Imperial Princess Kasha is aboard. We are en route to the Istvan system under direct orders from the Emperor to suppress the rebellion instigated by Warmaster Horus, the lieutenant replied, voice steady. There was a pause, then the White Scar's ship sent back authentication. Lord Axis, Imperial Princess Kasha, Chagatai Khan invites you to board the Bladestorm for a discussion. Tell Chagatai Khan we will come aboard immediately, Axis said. Meeting the White Scar's commander now could only help. Even if the entire fleet could not join them, Chagatai himself might assist in finding a webway beacon. Kasha and Axis boarded a torpedo launch and made for the Bladestorm. As they approached, Axis's unease deepened. The flagship showed signs of recent conflict. Blood stained the decks, and wounded White Scars lay where they had fallen. Chagatai Khan stood amid the carnage, blade sheathed, surrounded by the corpses of his legionaries. Axis saw no enemy aboard, no rival banners, only the aftermath. Apologies for the sight, Axis, Chagatai said, his voice calm. I have just put down a rebellion. Axis had expected Chaos Raiders when he followed Chagatai Khan's ship. He had never imagined a rebellion. The White Scars were supposed to be loyal. Now, as he stepped into the cavernous cabin, he found dozens of those same space marines kneeling with their hands bound. The sight made his jaw tighten. Chagatai Khan rose to meet him. This is complicated, and I can't explain it all quickly, but since fate has brought you aboard, There are things I must ask." He looked at Axis with measured curiosity. "Speak," Axis said. Chaghatai's next question cut straight to the bone. "In this great heresy stirred by Horus, whose side are you on, the Emperor's or Horus's?" Axis blinked. Why ask? Everyone knew Horus had turned. Horus was steeped in chaos. Axis's answer was automatic. "I'm on the Emperor's side, on humanity's side. Horus has been led astray by chaos." At his words, Kasha, standing silently at Axis's shoulder, sharpened her eyes. The question felt like an accusation. Could Chagatai himself have defected? Kasha's hand moved to her staff, ready to strike. Chagatai raised a placating hand. "No, don't think I mean to betray the Emperor," he said. "But do you truly believe our father is a good ruler, that the Imperium he forged is perfect?" Kasha bristled. "Chogoris, have you turned on the Emperor?" She snapped, the staff lifting higher. Axis stepped in between them and held her back. He understood the danger of such words, how they could be read as treason in this hour of fracture. Still, Chagatai's voice was steady, honest in its roughness. "I was born on a steppe world," Chagatai continued. "I have seen empires and tyrants. The Imperium the Emperor built is more brutal than anything I once overthrew. The lives of those on the lower worlds have not improved. Often they are worse. The Emperor loves humanity as a whole, but he does not love individuals. He sacrifices much for the species' survival. That makes him a tyrant. The Imperium is a cesspit." Kasha exploded. "He's defected to Horus. He's a traitor." Her roar filled the cabin. Axis surprised them both by answering gently, but without flinching. "He's right that the Emperor can be a tyrant." Kasha's eyes widened in disbelief and anger at her own husband. What was this, and why would he tolerate such words? Chagatai's face softened into something like relief. He had not expected Axis to agree with him at all, but Axis was not endorsing treason. "However," Axis went on, "Horus and the chaos that grips him would be worse. If chaos ruled humanity, the Imperium would become a living hell." That settled Chagatai, if only a little. He had known Horus's temptation was real. In the White Scars, a significant number of his scions had urged him to join Horus and overthrow the Emperor. Temptation had cut deep. The Emperor's methods bred resentment. In other timelines, after Leman Russ butchered Prospero, a fragment of Magnus's soul had crossed paths with Chagatai, and many of the White Scars had been close to following the War Master. Chagatai himself had even assigned some of the more ardent defectors to the Bladestorm to intercept the fallen Primarch Mortarion, a punitive, atoning mission. In the end, he had suppressed the insurrection, executing hardliners and taking those who had argued for defection under strict control. If someone more fitting than the Emperor could rule mankind, Guilliman or Sanguinius or Horus before his fall, I might have given them my loyalty, Chagatai admitted. But Chaos is different. It is a greater cesspit than any empire. If Horus had not turned, he might have been the one to lead us. But he did, and that changes everything. Kasha's anger cooled into weary admonishment. "You do not know the burdens the Emperor bears. He sacrifices for the Imperium. We face enemies so terrible that only ruthless decisions can keep humanity alive." Axis listened. Politics was not his concern. He was a Saiyan, uninterested in courtly arguments. He had recited these truths from a manual, not out of ideology. Still, he understood the scale. "I understand," Chagatai said after a long pause. "I will stand with the Emperor in this heresy. I will do my best to crush the rebellion." Kasha let out a guarded breath. She watched the bound White Scars with suspicion. "And what will you do with those who would have betrayed the Emperor?" she asked. Chagatai's voice hardened. "They will atone. I will make them atone with me. I will lead them against the true traitors." He meant to take his legion to Istvan Fuf and punish Horus's rebellion. Axis took the opportunity. This was a chance to give the Khan a task that might steer him straight and strengthen the Imperium's future. "The Emperor has need of you beyond Istvan," he said. "There is a mission I must assign." Chagatai inclined his head. "Tell me, what does the Emperor ask?" "You are to proceed immediately to Guilliman," Axis said. "Together, you and Guilliman will seek out an alien device called Pharos. It is akin to the Astronomicon on Holy Terra, a beacon. Find it and bring it to Terra. It will be invaluable to the Imperium, and after that, both your legions will return to defend Terra." Chagatai frowned in contemplation. "This lighthouse of the Second Empire, what is this so-called Pharos system?" 235. Sacrifice is the cornerstone of the Empire. Istvan Futh. Well, how should I put it? It's something like the Astronomicon on Holy Terra, a beacon that can guide Imperium ships through the warp. You know the warp storm is raging now. Travel through the warp is extremely hazardous and often limited to blind jumps. But if we could bring this Pharos system to Holy Terra, it could largely solve the problem, Axis explained. He gave Chagatai Khan a concise account of the Pharos system's importance. Earlier, he and the Emperor had discussed alternatives to simply waiting out the warp storm. One option was to recover the Pharos system and use it to augment the Astronomicon's reach. The other, proposed by Makardo the Grand Vizier, was far more brutal: to turn the Golden Throne, the Emperor, and the Astronomicon into a single, terrible engine. Makardo's plan would deliberately overload Terra's Astronomicon by burning 1,000 psychers each day, channeling their souls and the Emperor's psychic might to ignite the beacon. The Golden Throne's emanations would then help to pierce the warp storm, affording a degree of protection to transiting fleets. The Emperor had listened to both proposals. The Pharos method relied on alien technology. Humanity did not understand, useful if it worked, but impossible to maintain without expertise. Axis had proposed searching for it, and the Emperor had agreed only cautiously. The Golden Throne scheme, on the other hand, would achieve immediate, powerful results, but at a terrible cost. It would bind the Emperor ever more tightly to the throne. If anything failed, the Astronomicon, the throne, or the Emperor himself, the consequences would be catastrophic. Axis, I understand most of what you mean, Chagatai said. I'll depart for Ultramar to find Guilliman immediately. I should tell you, though, the warp seems to be easing up a little. The navigators report they can see Terra's light again. If the Astronomicon hadn't recovered even a little, he wouldn't have received messages or found his way to this unfamiliar system. The warp storm hasn't weakened. Logically, the Astronomicon shouldn't have recovered, Axis said. The storm itself is as fierce as ever, Chagatai replied, but the Astronomicon is burning brighter, blazing in the warp. It's even emitting a golden light that protects ships. Axis's face tightened. If the warp had not calmed but the Astronomicon shone more fiercely, there was only one explanation. The Emperor had likely accepted Makardo's plan and begun the daily sacrifices. Chagatai Khan, then the second plan is probably already in motion, Axis said. At least 1,000 psychers are being burned each day to stoke the Astronomicon. You must retrieve the Pharos system as quickly as possible. It might spare many lives. I understand. I leave now. Chagatai's expression showed the urgency. The Imperium could not afford delay. Kasha began to speak, but Axis raised a hand to stop her. This was the White Scar's affair. As long as Chagatai remained loyal to the Emperor, Axis trusted him. Chagatai's contempt for the Emperor was no secret, but once the Primarch chose loyalty, he would fight to the death. Those White Scars who had pledged themselves to Horus had already been purged. The survivors still served the Imperium and their gene seed. That was enough. After a short further discussion, Kasha and Axis boarded their frigate. Back aboard the fleet, Cassandra came before Axis and bowed. Spare the formalities. How are we positioned? When can we re-enter the webway? Axis asked. Lord Axis, a Harlequin record-keeper, answered after consulting calculations. There is no webway entrance in this local system. The star here is a red dwarf with no habitable planets, so no webway portals. The nearest entrance lies at least 30 light-years away. A blind warp jump would take days. At conventional FTL, it would be months. Understood. Plot a course for the nearest webway entrance, Axis said. Our ship has no navigator, the frigate captain said anxiously. The vessel had been built in secret and crewed with temporary personnel. No navigator had been assigned. I am the navigator, Kasha said with a smile. Who better than the Emperor's daughter? Navigators of the noble houses drew their sight from the Astronomicon and used instruments. Kasha needed none of it. A powerful psyker could impose her will on the warp. With her, the ship could go anywhere. Let Kasha guide us through the warp. Enter the coordinates, and she will take over, Axis instructed. The crew agreed, and the Harlequins transmitted the target coordinates. The warp drive engaged, and the frigate plunged into the violent, roiling warp. For the first time in days, Kasha could clearly see the Astronomicon on Terra and steered by its light. We'll reach the webway entrance in 3 days, she said. From there, 2 days through the webway to Istvanth. Good, full speed. We can't afford more delays, Axis replied. After the frigate departed, Chagatai ordered his fleet to weigh anchor. Great Khan, what will you do with the traitors? A company captain asked. The White Scars were vast. In this rebellion, some 30,000 Marines had risen. Thousands had already been executed. More than 26,000 remained willing to follow Horus. They're traitors, Chagatai said. Although I loathe the Emperor, their actions are betrayal. Yet I bear some responsibility for their turn. I will give them a chance. When we face the enemy, they will lead the charge. Suicide missions, rearguard, any task where atonement comes through death. They will be given the chance to make amends. He sighed inwardly. He had long detested the Emperor's tyranny. If Horus had not been turned by chaos and the galaxy had followed a different path, he might have stood with Horus. But chaos was a graver evil. Humanity could not be handed to it. The White Scars fleet entered the warp under Chagatai's command. On Holy Terra, the Emperor in the Golden Throne allowed himself a small sigh. The earlier jolt that had expelled Axis's ship from the webway had not been the work of the Chaos Gods, but of a different self, a Dark Emperor. That other self had attempted to cast Axis and his companions out of the galaxy entirely. Fortunately, the Emperor had seen the scheme in time and intervened. That intervention had allowed Axis and Chagatai's fleets to meet and to pass on orders. Even burning 1,000 psychers a day could only temporarily hold back Shadow. He still had to stabilize the Astronomicon and secure the webway. Father, Magnus said, voice tight with pain, once Chagatai brings back the Pharos system, can we stop this? These psychers are not to blame. Magnus hated the practice. At first, some psychers had volunteered. Later, many were simply taken blindfolded, used as fuel with no knowledge of their fate. The Imperium's treatment of psychers shocked even him. Magnus, the Emperor said quietly, I hope the Pharos can augment the Astronomicon as Axis described. But sacrifice is inevitable now. We must stabilize the beacon, secure the webway, and hold Terra. Sacrifice, Magnus murmured and bowed his head. For all his intellect and compassion, he accepted the grim calculus. Psychers would pay, in blood and fire, to preserve humanity. For the foreseeable future, the pyres might never cease. Time passed. 4 days later, after 3 days of travel through the warp, Axis and his companions re-entered the webway. Istvan lay less than a day ahead. At Istvan 5, 3 legions had already arrived. Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, Vulcan of the Salamanders, and Korax, the Raven Lord, had gathered aboard Ferris's flagship. Strange, Vulcan said, scanning the orbital feeds. Where are the traitors' defenses? No orbital fortifications, no fleets, nothing. The skies above Istvan were unnaturally quiet. They had expected a space battle. Instead, there was nothing in orbit. Where had Horus's ships gone? Cartographer, run a surface sweep. I want planetary intelligence, Ferris ordered. The operator immediately began a full planetary scan. Manus, Korax said cautiously, we should not be complacent. It may be wise to hold until the other 5 legions arrive. Perhaps they did not expect us so soon, Ferris replied. It could be an opportunity. What I want most is to cut Fulgrim's head off. The operator's tone changed. Lord Primarch, we are detecting numerous defensive fortifications across the planet's surface and an unusually large presence of Xenos. Horus's trick? The whole planet is green-skinned. Xeno forces? Are you sure you're not mistaken? Ferrus Manus asked, frowning. They had come to deal with traitors, so why would there be Xeno races on Istvan 5? Could it be the Raiden? Korax said. Rumor has it Horus has allied with the Raiden. These traitors have even consorted with Xenos. In the days since the betrayal, intelligence had been chaotic. Horus had raised a host of traitors. Some reports even claimed he had allied with the Imperium's enemies to strike from both east and west. Thankfully, the Western Front was held by Lionel Johnson and Leman Russ. If true, those fronts would need to be reinforced once this uprising here was contained. Reporting, Primarchs. It's not the Raiden, it's Orcs, the mortal naval commander in charge of planetary reconnaissance said. The 3 Primarchs stared as a virtual projection flickered to life and filled the bridge. The imagery was plainly not of Horus's men, but of greenskins, orcs, staggering, fighting, and swarming across the surface. Scattered amongst them lay wreckage and broken wargear. What? Orcs? The Primarch's faces changed. They had expected traitors, not a planet full of orcs. Yes, Primarchs, we have confirmed it repeatedly. I will display the tactical overlays. The officer tightened his grip on the consoles and brought up more data. Could this be an intelligence error? Did we come for nothing? Horus's forces might have already left the system, Vulcan offered. It was the only neat explanation, unless the traitors had decamped. Impossible, Ferris Manus said. Our intelligence placed Horus's army in this system. Korax had already stooped over the feed, eyes flicking between images. Look at their state, he said quietly. These orcs are primitive. No heavy walkers, no killicans or death dreads, no air wings. They are barely into firearm-level technology. They have no spacefaring capability. Someone has supplied them with scrap and wrecked Imperial hulls, but there are no asteroid garbage ships loitering nearby. Vulcan and Ferris nodded. Korax's assessment matched the raw telemetry. These orcs looked newly emergent, ripe with potential for rapid evolution, but not yet catalyzed. Without a great war to drive them, orc society can linger at this level for long stretches. Ordinarily, orc boys brawl, an orc boss rises, bosses war until a war boss unifies a planet, and only then do they build proper fleetcraft and embark on interstellar rampages. Left alone, they'd be dangerous locally but contained. With a war as a catalyst, though, their development could explode in months. The orcs on Istvan Futh are divided into factions and show no intent of leaving the planet, Korax continued. They've only just been born as a civilization. Horus could be using them to harass us, wear us down with attrition, or to distract our attention. Horus the traitor would use Xenos against us? Ferris Manus said. The notion fit the traitor Primarch's cunning. Possibly, Vulcan said, but exterminating the planet is the simplest approach. Exterminate us from orbit, wipe them clean. Orcs must never be allowed to seed themselves. An exterminatus would waste enormous ordnance, Korax objected. And what if this is exactly the ploy? Horus might be baiting us to expend munitions needlessly. We should not make any radical decisions until the other legions arrive. Wait, consolidate, then act. Ferris waited a moment and nodded. The situation was too odd for a unilateral solution. Search the whole Istvan system, leave no quarter unchecked. I want to know if Horus's legion is hiding anywhere here. We'll split up, sweep every body and every moon. Rendezvous back at Istvan Fiv in 3 days, Korax replied. Detachments of the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard spread out in company-sized search elements. Istvan III was the first to be scoured. There the evidence was brutal and unmistakable. Virus bombs, eradicated loyalists, scattered remains of space marines. A massacre had been executed. Countless loyalists had fallen. 3 days later, the 3 Primarchs reconvened. They had searched the system in full. Aside from the primitive orcs and ruined wrecks, there was nothing. No Horus, no traitor host. Can we reach the other legions? Ferris asked in his flagship's ready room. The Great Genefather, astropathic messages to the other 5 legions have repeatedly failed, the comms officer reported. Every dispatch has been unanswered. Ferris frowned. They sent again and again, but the psychic channels yielded silence. He considered waiting a while longer to search, but prudence demanded a further sweep of Istvan itself. He ordered the Iron Hands fleet to converge. As the joined fleets dropped into orbit above Istvan V, alarms screamed through bridge suites. Tactical displays flashed jagged energy signatures. What is it? Vulcan's voice crackled. Ferris snapped to the tactical screen. Dozens of ships, cobbled from scrap and industrial hulls, had come into being in the vacuum above the planet. Their skins were hideously warped, covered with plate scars and weld seams. Their engines belched soot and flame, but they were closing fast. Impossible, Vulcan roared. How can orcs have a space fleet? It's a trap, Korax said coldly. Horus has used these primitive orcs as a diversion. The real threat is not the greenskins on the ground, but whatever warboss brought that fleet. Korax had seen the telltale signs. The ships moving on the tactical overlay had just appeared. No slow shipbuilding sequence, no local assembly yards. Their vectors and signature profiles matched a force that had only just completed a warp jump. If I'm not mistaken, Korax said, voice low, Horus found a powerful war boss, baited or compelled him, and orchestrated his arrival. He seeded Istvan Futh with fragile domestic orcs to give us one impression. then lured or summoned a spacefaring war boss to strike when we arrived. Orcs, when presented with humans, attack without parley. Horus used them to conceal the real weapon. The fleets braced. The scrap-built armada hurled itself toward the Imperial ships, and the three Primarchs readied their men and minds for the onslaught that had been so carefully set for them. To the Orc warlord, Horus's killer move. Countless orcs roared as they piloted an armada of cobbled-together, bizarre craft toward the human fleet, eyes glittering with bloodlust. Horus, that bastard! Fenris Manus cursed through clenched teeth. Warp rifts still gaped open, spewing more orc junk into the system as the raiders struck with brutal, unpredictable ferocity. Fenris, be careful. Conserve your strength. We must be ready. Horus may strike when we're exhausted, Vulcan warned. He hadn't finished before the first orc salvo slammed into the fleet. Their macro cannons did not fire conventional shells, but clouds of scrap metal held together in gravitic fields. Razor-sharp debris that cut through void shields and punched jagged holes in hulls. A salamander's frigate's engine detonated, and the wreck tumbled screaming toward Isfan's atmosphere. All fleet, evasive, prioritize the enemy flagship. Fenris Manus bellowed, slamming a fist onto the command console. The Iron Hand's battleship Iron Fist swung its lance array and shredded a crab-like orc cruiser to slag. But more crawled out of the wreckage, their massive drills and ram prows snapping at human hulls. They're boarding. Korax's Raven Guard wove like shadowed knives, but the orcs came in such numbers that even agile formations could not stem the tide. An Iron Hand strike cruiser was hauled alongside by 3 grapples, its armor twisted and screamed as plates tore. Wah! For Gork and Mork. A harsh, hijacked frequency filled their comms. A guttural voice laughed and taunted the Imperials. Human runts! Our Big Bang will make a lovely snack. On the tactical display, an orc space fortress, welded from Titan wreckage and salvaged hulls, slowly opened gun ports. A super cannon on its belly began to charge, bathing half the starfield in a ghastly green light. It can punch through our shields in one hit. Vulcan's pupils narrowed. Concentrate fire. Orc technology, crude as it seemed, was ruthlessly effective. Before the admirals could react, a green lance arced across the void and struck. The Iron Hand's flagship took the beam dead center. The blast's shockwave flipped nearby Raven Guard vessels like toys. When the flames died, the Iron Fist's bridge plating had flowed into a molten red ruin. The Glory Queen battleship gaped open where its bow had been. Air evacuated into the vacuum. Many crew were torn from their stations and died in the void. Orcs cheered and surged to board. Lord Fenris, orcs are on board, the Iron Hand's vox crackled. Fenris Manus rose from the ruined bridge, his power armor spattered with molten metal and blood. Through the fractured observation dome, he watched a tide of green pour through hull breaches, brandishing crude choppas and shootas. My sons, hold the bridge, Manus roared. The first wave of boys never brought their shots to bear. Fenris Manus ended them with a single crushing blow, green flesh and rusted metal spray erupting outward. Still, the swarm pressed on, wagging and cackling. The Iron Hands formed a shield wall. Bolter fire hammered the narrow corridor, while orc boys surged like a living tide. A veteran Terminator smashed an orc knob's skull with a power fist, but 3 chain axes bit through his ceramite the next moment, sending him down in a red bloom. There are too many, one Marine cried as an orc's chain axe tore a shoulder plate free after his blade had beheaded a boy. Let them see true iron. Let them see our resolve. Fenris Manus bellowed, driving his legions forward. He charged with his power hammer swinging, cleaving through the orc ranks. 3 warbosses' choppas struck his back as ceramite sparks flew. With a savage backhand, he snapped an orc's spine and used the corpse as a bludgeon. Fenris, you all right? Vulcan's voice threaded through Manus's comm. Manus crushed an orc's throat with ease and answered without looking away from the fight. I'm holding. How go things with you and Korax? We're managing. We saw your ship go. Orcs are boarding. Need help? Don't underestimate the Iron Hands. This is small. Save your strength. Horus will wait for us to bleed each other dry. Fenris cut the channel. The Iron Hands could not contact the 5 legions now unreachable in the rifted stars. 3 legions were isolated and likely to come under Horus's weight. He would make his legion stand fast, defeat this orc horde, and conserve strength for the true threat to come. Right then the ship groaned with a metallic keening. Above Istvon Fov, a colossal warp rift yawned open, and something immense crushed through it. A battle moon, welded from asteroids, wrecked warships, and dead titans. Its surface bristled with 100,000 orc gun emplacements. An eerie green charged across the void like venom. Gravitic lashes sprouted from its hull and snatched nearby ships, pulverizing them. Gruckface Rippa has arrived. All runts will be turned to scrap, a filthy transmission crowed. The battle moon's belly yawned open and unleashed a kilometer-wide lash of wag energy. Two Iron Hands cruisers vaporized. Molten droplets froze into iron rain that fell like tombstones in the vacuum. The orcs roared in triumph. The Iron Fist's gravity field began to fail. The deck bucked like a ship at sea, hurling warriors into the air. Great hydraulic feet stomped through the deck. Gruck himself had come aboard. He was a walking mountain of muscle. His left arm ended in an incinerator cannon spitting molten steel, and his right shoulder carried a butt blasta fashioned from the skull of an Emperor-class Titan. Each step left a printed scar on the deck. "Runt boss, I'll wipe my arse with your head." Gruck's war cry shattered the observation dome. He'd been dared, and had boarded in fury. The fact the human he faced wore black armor mattered little. All runts were meat. "Korax, Vulcan, you two find a way to destroy that battle moon. I'll hold him here," Ferris Manus said, raising his hammer. If the moon established its weapons, the Glory Queen line would not survive. The good news, Gruck had been reckless enough to step onto the deck. Ferris, a gene seed Primarch, would teach him discipline. "We understand. Be careful," both Vulcan and Korax answered, and with their legions they launched boarding craft toward the battle moon. Salamanders and Raven Guard dropped like knives, intending to plant meltabombs and tear the orc fort to scrap. "Come then, foul green beast," Ferris snarled. If the warboss was not the sort of monster that stalked Ulanor, no orc could withstand a Primarch's hammer. Gruck laughed in a sound like breaking stone and charged like a living siege engine. He stood over 6 meters tall, raw muscle and crude bionics. Ferris met him without dodging. If he feared this, he would not be Iron Hands. The power hammer struck the warboss's massive power claw. Power met power in a collision that rattled the ship. The blast sent wreckage, bodies, and fighters tumbling through the bridge. Gruck's incinerator cannon belched, a molten waterfall that sealed off Ferris's retreat. Manus roared, activated his hammer's disintegrator field, and spun. The forge hand carved a white-hot arc, a miniature son of Hammerforce, and drove it into Gruck, sending the behemoth sprawling. Before the orc could rise, Ferris closed and brought his hammer down on the warboss's skull. "Die, monster!" With a clang, a purple snake-like blade slid between hammer and skull and took the blow. "Long time no see, my dear brother." The voice slid out of the shadows like silk and ice. A flash of purple, and Fulgrim, perfect, terrible Fulgrim, stepped into the light. His serpentine power sword, Flamberge, met Ferris Manus's hammer with a ringing parry. The disassembler field on Ferris's weapon screamed against the razor-forged blade and sent a spray of sparks into the air. Fulgrim stood before him, immaculate armor gleaming, a mocking smile playing on his lips. The pride that had once shone in those eyes had been replaced by something exquisite and cruel. "Fulgrim?" Ferris's voice was a low, torn thing. Rage curdled through it. "How dare you show your face, you damn traitor!" "Oh, so formal." Fulgrim's laugh was light as a dagger. He flicked his blade and forced Ferris's hammer back, then stepped away with the grace of a dancer. He allowed his gaze to sweep the brutal tableau around them, Iron Hands locked in grim combat with orcs, and shook his head with theatrical disappointment. "Look at you, Manus, reduced to this, fighting greenskins. Truly pathetic." "Shut your mouth." Ferris's hammer rose in a vicious arc. "You followed Horus. You turned on the Emperor, on humanity. You don't deserve the name Primarch." Fulgrim slipped the blow aside as if it were a trifle, his blade darting like a snake to Ferris's throat and forcing a parry. His voice went low, honeyed. "Betrayal? No. We simply saw the truth. The Emperor lied to us, Ferris. He used us. Tools, weapons, a tyrant." "Lies!" Ferris slammed the hammer again, a strike that would have cleaved a warship in two but was met and blunted by Fulgrim's blade. Ferris's face contorted. "I called you my brother. We forged weapons together. We trusted each other. Now I see I was wrong." Fulgrim's smile didn't waver. "I didn't come to gloat. I came to save you. There is still a future where humanity can be perfected if you will join us. Fenris spat. You'd save me? You would betray everything and come rescue me? You're a liar, a charlatan. Fulgrim's tone was patient. This is a trap, Manus. Horus said it. Many arrangements on this world. The greenskins are part of the play, but the real blow was prepared for Axis. He wasn't speaking in riddles. The truth tumbled out. Horus had laid plans. The orcs were only one element. There's still a way out. Join us and we can cast off the Emperor's yoke. Ferris's jaw tightened. If a trap existed, he had to know its shape. He fumbled for his vox, static. The line to the other Primarchs had gone dead. You cut me off, Fulgrim observed. Only 10 minutes, Manus. 10 minutes to persuade you. Fenris came at him, each swing a cathedral of force designed to break armor and bone. Fulgrim was a slippery viper, impossibly graceful, avoiding mortal hits and replying with economy and elegance that exposed gaps in Ferris's defenses. Fenris tried the vox again. Only hissing silence answered. And how do you intend to persuade me, Fenris demanded between blows, with a future that is purer, truer, for you, for your gene sons? In this war, the Emperor is finished. Fulgrim's eyes glittered. He did not expect Fenris to accept, but he pressed on. Then Horus's voice crackled through Fulgrim's calm, an ugly bellow. Fulgrim, you idiot! I told you not to act alone. Why did you blow your chance? Listen to him scold me, Fulgrim said, offering the interjection as proof of the trap. He planned this to wipe you out. Where are the other legions? Fenris demanded. The remainder should be on their way. The remaining 5 have not yet arrived, Fulgrim answered, then threw the knife. Of those 5, 4 have already turned to our side. Fenris felt something cold and leaden drop into his gut. Which ones? Fulgrim named them, Wordbearers, Iron Warriors, the so-called Second, the Alpha, the Night Lords. Then let the list hang there like accusation and confirmation. The implication was ruinous. This was not 7 against 4, but 8 against 4. Ferris's hatred for Fulgrim burned harder than anything he felt for Horus. Fulgrim had been a brother. Before he could make of it what he would, a huge shape tore through the air and slammed into Fulgrim's flank. The orc warboss, who had been felled by Fenris in 2 savage blows, roared back to his feet, more infuriated than wounded. In orc terms, his fight with the iron-skinned shrimp was a great honor, and the interruption was an insult. You ugly, greasy gusset! The warboss bellowed, lashing out at Fulgrim. Fulgrim sneered. His blade danced. One mighty arc, and the warboss's head left his shoulders before the giant even saw the strike's path. With a second, finer motion, the sword shredded the body into pieces until nothing remained of the giant grot but a spray of gore. Ignorant beast, Fulgrim mocked. You have no idea how great the gulf is between you and us. He looked back to Fenris. Manus, time is up. Will you join us? Will you reject the Emperor and accept the truth with me? I'd rather be his slave than Chaos's dog. Fenris drove his hammer into the deck. The concussive thump shoved Fulgrim back. Madness sprang into Fulgrim's features like a bloom. Then die, stubborn fool. Fulgrim's sword blurred. Each strike was a whisper of purple light aimed at Fenris's vitals. Fenris parried desperately, but Fulgrim's speed and artistry, a beauty of swordsmanship only matched by the likes of Sanguinius or the Lion, found a seam. Flamberge found shoulder bulwark and drove through, metal screaming into Fenris's flesh. Pain rattled out of Manus in a raw sound, but he did not fall back. He seized the blade with his hand, despite the rasp of cutting metal, letting blood run over his gauntlet. You were always in love with perfection, Fenris said through clenched teeth. You sought it once. Now look at you, what you've become. For a moment, something like regret glimmered in Fulgrim's eyes. Then it curdled into something darker. No, Fenris, I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to save you. But now, the main event is about to begin. A ripple tore open the vacuum of space outside the battlefield. A sword-class frigate screamed through a warp rift, and from its maw, a figure of golden light burned into being on the deck. Axis fell into the fray like a living sun. White gold energy flared from Axis's palms. He struck the orc battle moon with a single searing blast. Explosions rolled outward like storms. The colossal device that had baffled 3 legions and required 2 Primarchs to even attempt neutralizing it shook and fragmented beneath his onslaught. Orc vessels ruptured in showers of flame as Axis glowed like a war god in the vacuum. Vulcan and Korax, who had been on the battle moon with a demolition squad, found themselves plucked from the inferno and dumped into the frigate's hull by a psychic telepole from Kasha. Korax stared at the figure draped in golden light, wonder and a little unbelieving hope in his expression. "Is that the Emperor?" he whispered, then cursed himself as Axis winked out of sight, only to reappear another instant later. The Primarch's reputation, even to those who had not seen him in person, preceded him. Vulcan relaxed into a grin. "Axis is here," he said simply. "We have this." Kasha, awake, present, cold and sure, gave a single nod. "Where is Ferris Manus?" she asked. "We lost contact." "He's on the Fist of Iron," Korax answered. "He was fighting a war boss." The line went dead. Back on the Fist, Fulgrim's features twisted as a dark reddish-purple force slid through him like oil. A voice, not entirely male, not entirely female, rose in his mind. "Don't be afraid. Leave it to me. Your body is mine to guide." Fulgrim stiffened. He fought, but his limbs moved as if someone else steered them. The blade of the lair rose, the tip curving toward Ferris Manus's head. At the worst instant, two fingers of blinding, golden light clamped onto Fulgrim's sword. A white shockwave smashed into Fulgrim and threw the phoenix back. Axis had arrived between them at the last heartbeat, his power halting the blow that would have finished Ferris. Fulgrim's eyes flared with fury and something like fear as the golden grip held him fast. Ferris sagged, but lived, the blade still between them, and the battle that would decide brothers and betrayals hung on a knife edge. 239. Kill Fulgrim angrily. Supernova explosion. Are you Axis? Ferris Manus stared at the man who radiated pure gold like sunlight, bewilderment plain on his face. The newcomer's arrival had been blinding. The force he carried with him was terrifying. Ferris had just watched with his own eyes an orc battle moon shatter. Now this. Axis inclined his head once. With a single, casual flick of his finger, Fulgrim was sent skidding backward dozens of paces. Astonishment flickered across the fallen Primarch's features and was instantly replaced by furious, humiliated rage. "You're Axis, aren't you? I've heard of you. They say you're the strongest among the Gene-Seed Primarchs," Fulgrim sneered, his voice curling into that peculiar, genderless lilt that always made Axis's skin crawl. A purple-gold aura shivered around him. Axis spared a glance for Ferris Manus, confirming the Iron Hands was grievously wounded, but not dead, then turned his full attention back to Fulgrim. "He's not himself," Ferris muttered from the side. "The Fulgrim who fought me, this isn't him." "I know." Axis's tone was flat. "His body's been taken by a Slaanesh great demon, such a waste." Fulgrim's fall hadn't come out of nowhere. His relentless pursuit of perfection had long made him prey for Slaanesh. He had taken the Serpentine Xeno's weapon, the Lair Blade, an artifact god-tier in power, but cursed. A Slaanesh great daemon had been bound in the sword. In old tales, the daemon possessed Fulgrim outright. Later revisions said Fulgrim had wrested control back after the heresy. Whether the daemon or the Primarch, Axis intended to end him. "Ha! You're only barely interesting to my master," Fulgrim began. He never finished. Axis was already on him, moving so fast that even a Primarch's reflexes strained to follow. A heavy fist drove into Fulgrim's midsection, denting the ornate purple and gold cuirass and blowing out the rear plating. Fulgrim spat blood and cartwheeled through 3 bulkheads like a ragdoll before slamming to a halt. Axis's figure shimmered. He was on Fulgrim again in a heartbeat. He wrenched the Primarch's helmet and smashed it into the deck. The warship shuddered under the impact. The metal floor bowed like a throat. "Enough of the bluster," Axis said evenly. The pressure in his hands tightened. Fulgrim's helmet creaked and buckled, its filigree sheared away. "No, you!" Fulgrim's outrage turned to animal screams. A blast of purple-red energy flared from him, a scream of corrupted power, but it died the instant it met Axis's golden aura, evaporating like frost. Axis slammed Fulgrim's head into the hull again and again, then booted him, bang, 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 until the ship itself seemed to tremble with the blows. Fulgrim's face was a ruin, black and blue, a broken nose, teeth loosened and spattered with blood. Axis hauled him upright by his hair and slapped him hard enough to send more teeth flying. Half his face swelled grotesquely. Ferris Manus watched, slack-jawed, even as his disbelief warred with grim recognition. Axis had the reputation of being violent. Seeing it executed so easily, so utterly, was jaw-dropping. "Tell me," Axis said, his hand at Fulgrim's throat. What's Horus's conspiracy? Which gene seed Primarchs have betrayed the Emperor? Tell me, and I may give you a merciful death. Fulgrim's voice slurred and spat, all defiance and madness. You, how dare you my face, my handsome face? Axis only tightened his grip and slapped him again, deliberately evening the swelling on both cheeks. Fulgrim's speech slurred into nonsense. Axis's patience snapped. He lifted Fulgrim and drove a crushing blow into his neck. Bone cracked. Axis seized the Primarch's head and rained blows down the throat and collar until the screams turned into a wet, tearing cacophony. He planted a foot on Fulgrim's chest, planted both hands in the hair, and pulled up. Fulgrim's howl was a tearing, inhuman sound. Blood arced from the wound as Axis ripped the head from the shoulders, spinal cord trailing from where the skull came free. Gouts of blood splattered the Iron Hand's armor. Fulgrim's headless body thudded down. The physical Primarch lay dead, but the lair blade had held his soul. The daemon within the sword was not so easily killed. Axis held the severed head in one hand. His face had gone dark with something like contempt. Axis, the communicator in his ear, Fenris stammered. It can reach Horus. Axis hadn't needed to be told twice. He snatched the device from Fulgrim's ear, the only delicate thing he'd spared while tearing the head off, and pressed it to his own ear. Horus, Axis said into the speaker, this fight is done. Come out and face death. I can make it quick. You are exactly as I imagined, Axis. Horus's voice flowed from the communicator, bold, flattering, venomous. So rigid, so obedient, but you waste yourself on the Emperor. Join me. Everything the Emperor promised you, I can give and far more. I will make the human race great again. Completely uninterested, Axis answered with a single hard word. He had no illusions that Horus was anything but a pawn now, no matter how flattering the pitch. What a pity, Horus replied, amusement lacing the words. I never understood why a being like you would kneel. You could have had choices. On Ulanor, far away, a host of Chaos Warlocks were finishing the last lines of a massive sorceress diagram etched across the planet's surface. They raised their hands, and the sigils drank life, tearing vitality from every orc in range. The lifeblood of entire swarms was being fed into a spell. If you think buying time helps, you're wrong, Axis said. He grabbed Fenris with his free hand and made a rapid, urgent gesture for him to gather any survivors. Heh, Horus said. You're strong, Axis, but you are not my target. You might destroy a planet, perhaps a system, but can you stand against a burning star? What are you talking about? Using a star? Axis cut in. You thought those orcs on Istvan Futh were there for fighting? Horus's voice grew cold and triumphant. No, they were sacrifices. So were the 8 billion humans on Istvan III. I have my warlocks, my daemon princes, my great daemons drawing power together. They will ignite the system's star. You are powerful, but not a god. Today you die. You were offered mercy and refused it. Horus hung up as if he'd merely ended a pleasant conversation. The star at the heart of the system began to flare, unstable, its core thrumming with violent, unnatural fluctuations. A supernova was beginning to take hold. Axis didn't hesitate. He activated his psychic faculties, wrapped Fenris in a controlled teleportation, and vanished back to his frigate. Kasha! He barked as metal and lamps snapped into place around him. Find a way to teleport back as many of the surviving Loyalist Space Marines as you can. Bring them home now. 240. Resist the supernova and pass on the power Axis's psychic ability could bring back Fenris Manus and a few hundred nearby gene seed offspring. Kasha's talent was different. She could teleport large numbers of people from a planet's surface straight to her ship. In the face of a detonating star, every second counted, and every saved life mattered. The star in the galactic center, Horus is going to detonate it, Axis said. A supernova is imminent. We need to save as many as we can. Axis, Fenris Manus said quietly, I have tens of thousands of gene seed offspring on that vessel. Fenris's legion alone was packed with over 100,000 space marines. Add the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, and the Loyalist force approached 400,000, plus the hundreds of millions of mortals who accompanied them. The sword frigate they were on could not possibly hold all of them. I can't pull that many here, Axis admitted. This is just a frigate. We'll cram in whoever we can. Kasha, start the teleportation now. Notify any librarians, any intellect library members. who can still use their powers to bring people aboard. Kasha nodded. Her eyes glowed an icy blue as she opened her mind. Psychic light rolled across the battlefield and toward distant worlds, plucking survivors and carrying them back to the cramped cabins and corridors of the frigate. The message reached the librarians of the 3 loyalist legions, and blue pulses of energy marked the materialization of space marines from the Salamanders, Iron Hands, and Raven Guard inside the ship. When she returned to Axis's side, the strain showed on Kasha's face. "How do you plan to survive the supernova?" she asked. "Your psychic reach can blanket the ship, make a psychic shield over it, then push the void shield to maximum. I'll set up a defensive barrier on the outside and spin up the hyperspace engine," Axis replied. Then, as if the answer demanded more than technology, he drew on something deeper. He began to change. Brilliant golden-green energy erupted from him. His hair rose and his pupils vanished, his muscles swelling, his height increasing. Axis had entered a legendary Super Saiyan mode. He spread his hands, and a jade-green protective field began to crawl outward like an expanding shell, wrapping the frigate. Kasha matched him, pouring her psychic strength into a second layer of defense. The tech priest on the bridge screamed for the void shield to full power and slammed systems to their limits. Korax, the Raven Lord, bowed his head and called on shadows, throwing a third black barrier around the vessel. Every available safeguard, that of flesh, of mind, of machine, was thrown up between them and the star. The star swelled. It vomited searing plasma. A white light like the core of creation unlatched itself and slammed outward at the speed of light. The Istvan galaxy was drowned in that light. Planets vaporized. Warships were torn apart like paper. The shockwave unmade entire worlds in an instant. Axis's green field was the first to meet it. Even a supernova could not immediately punch through the shield he held. He pushed more and more of himself into the wall, sustaining the shimmering barrier against a force that should have annihilated him. Kasha's psychic dome absorbed radiation and debris. Korax's shadow swallowed heat and light. The ship's void shield flared and failed under the onslaught. Still the 3 held. It took a toll. Kasha's barrier quivered and bled. She spat blood, but did not let go. Korax collapsed, coughing blood into his cupped hands. The tech priest's void circuits collapsed. The hull of the frigate began to scorch and blister. Axis gritted his teeth. The emerald shield rippled under the impact, and he felt its vibrations resonate through bone and sinew. A supernova would kill a god of destruction if it struck bare flesh. He could survive it, he knew, but he was not protecting only himself. He was holding a ship 2 kilometers long. "Lord Axis, engines, damaged. We can't make a hyperspace jump," someone on the bridge yelled. Axis roared back. "Then we endure." He pushed past the legendary form, drawing on a power older and wilder. Red fur crawled up his skin, his golden mane fell away into black hair, his frame bulked out. Axis became Super Saiyan 4. The aura shifted, raw and animal. The jade barrier stiffened, forcing back the shockwave in a buckling push. The frigate, like a glass bead inside his palm, was driven outward toward the galaxy's rim. A supernova is not a moment, but an event. Its light and heat can last for ages. With every second, Axis poured more of himself into the shield until it was all he had left. "Activate the hyperspace engine when you can," he bellowed. "Get us into the warp." By then, Kasha's and Korax's shields had flickered and died. The void shield was gone. Only Axis's personal fortress held, a rounded citadel of emerald energy that stubbornly refused to break. The hyperspace engine strained, coughing and catching as technicians shoved systems beyond their designs. The frigate's outer hull melted and steamed. Some sections simply vaporized in the relentless heat. But at last, the engine came alive. The ship lurched, stumbled, and then shot forward, hauling itself out of the blast zone. They put distance between themselves and the deadening light and dove into the warp. When the white burned away from the view screens, Ferris Manus stared in disbelief. Axis sank to his knees, chest heaving, colors draining from his aura as the Super Saiyan transformations unraveled. The red fur faded. He was almost spent. Vulcan came forward immediately and helped him up. "Axis, Kasha, Korax, are you all right?" Kasha's face was pale, but she nodded. Korax lay unconscious, exhausted beyond endurance. Even gene-seed Primarchs had limits when asked to stand against the dying of a star. "Just tired," Axis managed. Ferris, tally them. Porin, how many did we get aboard? Ferris moved through the ship with grim efficiency, counting, confirming, summoning the survivors. He returned with the numbers, voice low. Over 8,000 survived, he said. 3,000 from my legion, 2,800 from the Salamanders, and 2,500 from the Raven Guard. Axis let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. That's still good, he said, wiping sweat and blood from his brow. At least we weren't completely wiped out.